I still believe that cannabis that you get in a dispensary is the cleanest thing you can put in and on your body. And the reason is...
We are here today with Guy Rocourt, one of the co-founders of Papa and Barkley's. You have a cannabis clean movement going right now.
When you walk into a dispensary, you are no longer really being offered plant medicine. 80 to 90% of the stuff is just isolate compound. One way to make sure that the farmer and the plant and the flower is honored is to not over-refine it. We're at an inflection point in the industry now where our farms could look like vineyards and we could build a real wine-like culture where every flower is taken care of and grown properly, so that as an extractor, all I have to do is shake it or wash it with some ice water. We have indoctrinated our entire society into accepting alcohol for no apparent reason. Meanwhile, to smoke a joint on TV is like the whole world's on fire for some reason. There's a huge white space in brands that speak to adults that are looking for better products. You ever have that friend that knows the designer, knows everything, knows all the couture line, and spends $1,000 for a t-shirt, right? Same thing with the wine friend or the beer nerd. Where's that in our industry? You know, the fact that there's a McDonald's everywhere. We create brands here and we export them to the rest of the world. We will do that with cannabis. The only reason why we haven't yet is because we're literally handcuffed. It's crazy making.
What's your biggest fear about the cannabis, our cannabis space?
So my biggest fear is that...
All right, we are here today with Guy Rocourt, and you are one of the co-founders of Papa and Barkley's. But before we get to all that, because that's an exciting story, well, let's get some background on you. You went to the Rochester Institute of Technology. You were in the Navy. What was that all about? How does a Navy guy from IT school end up in cannabis?
Yeah.
Like, what was that journey? What was that road?
Well, yeah, you know, interesting. I look back now, and I didn't have the words when I was younger, but I was much more conservative. I come from a first-generation American family. My parents were Haitian, you know, very conservative there in their own right. And, you know, when it came time to go to college, which was always on my radar, you know, and I thank my sister for that because she led the way. I was like, well, I'm going to go to the service and figure out how to pay for school. And so I did that. I was part of a program called Broadened Opportunity for Officer Selection and Training back then. And at the time, I went to RIT for physics. I thought I was going to go back nuke power, all of it. Okay. And then Bill Clinton gets elected and we start downsizing. And I, in my immature status, think, oh, the U.S. won. Peace on earth. You know, the Cold War is over. And I literally thought the military would not be a viable career.
What year? Okay, so what year is that?
This is like 1980. No, this is like 1990. You know, so I enlisted in 1988-ish, you know. And
you thought, okay, the world's had enough. Finally, peace on earth. We're moving in the right direction.
I had no idea about the Middle East. Even though I had gotten whatever they call that, like, there's a medal you get whenever we have an operation, but I think it's National Medal of Defense for Operation Kuwaiti freedom.
When you reclaimed the land back from Iraq. Yeah, I remember that.
So, you know, so that part, you know, so I'm in the, you know, I get into the military, I get this great ROTC opportunity. I go to Rochester Institute of Technology, you know, for physics. I'm gung-ho.
Wait, so you're a physics major?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
No, I have a huge science background, which eventually plays into...
Oh, man.
Cannabis. And of course, after the Cold War, one of the reasons why I decided to disenroll was there's always a girl involved, as you can imagine. So I meet this girl who's a photographer, and she's trying to do basic exposure latitudes, which is, I mean...
What the hell is that?
It's basically measuring, we don't have to do it in the digital age, but back in the days of film, you would want to have a higher... more light in the deep background than in the foreground, so that it all evens out, right? And like these formulas about, oh, I need this f-stop at 10 feet versus this f-stop at 2 feet.
Yeah, I used to see them. They adjust the lens for whatever the footage is.
So I start working with her, and I literally start what they say, seeing the light, like this painting with light. If you've ever worked with a cinematographer, like they seem like, most people are like, what are they doing? It's like, yeah, they're placing all these intense lights at different intensities so that when it hits the film, it looks right. It makes you look great, makes the background look great, that kind of stuff. So I got all caught up in that, and before you know it, I'm a filmmaker. So anyway, at one point I do a movie with Montel Williams. On that movie, he comes out with his MS. I only use cannabis barely recreationally at that point, right? But I start to see the medical benefits, right? And we start to hang out. And at one point, we really bond, and he's like, hey, stay on for post-production supervising. Then he's like, hey, I have this office in Paramount. Would you like to go out to LA?
Paramount.
Yeah.
That's pretty exciting when you heard that.
Oh, yeah. So I was always that. It took a lot to get the New Yorker out of me. I mean, I'm California all the way now. But back years ago, this is now, 30, 40 years ago, I was very New Yorker, right? So I was always like, I'm not going out to LA unless I get called out.
So what is the difference between New Yorkers and a person from LA?
Both have an ego. Both love their cities. I can say that, right? In New York, I do say that, like, all right, when we think Los Angeles, especially in the entertainment business, when I got here, I realized, oh, wow. It's like I work in a steel town. Everybody works in entertainment, right? And everybody's associated with entertainment somewhere. And that didn't exactly sit well. Whereas in New York, there's everybody, you could have a friend group and everybody does something completely different, right? New York's so packed tight in that way and has so many diverse, real money-making industries. Mm-hmm. It's not to say that LA doesn't have a lot of real money-making industries, but my introduction to it was mostly entertainment, right? And entertainment adjacent, right?
Let's talk about safe access, because you're an advocate of that, big. We're going to get to that, this movement that you're starting. What percentage, when you go into a dispensary these days, do you believe that the cannabis that you're buying is clean and safe? And I'm talking no pesticides, no fungicides, no crazy chemicals that were used on it. What's your thoughts on that?
Yeah. So I'm going to put it in context. Relative to generally regarded as safe and the rest of the world and what you might get at Safeway, 100% of it is. I still believe that cannabis that you get in a dispensary is the cleanest thing you can put in and on your body. And the reason is because we over-test cannabis. Here in California, we test final form, right? So whatever it is, like as a formulator, it's harder for me to get clean essential oils, right? Or clean walnuts or something like that than it is to get clean cannabis, because all that other stuff has tons of pesticides, tons of other stuff in it.
It does. People would be shocked if they knew what was on our vegetables and what they do. Like just like strawberries. Strawberries have a huge nematode problem.
Yeah.
And they literally fumigate the rows of strawberries, and they got to let it sit for like a month or two or something like this. Yeah. And then grow the strawberries. Yeah. You're telling me that some of that isn't getting up in there?
Yeah, and that's one of my issues, because so if you think of strawberry as a flavor, because it's almost impossible to get a natural strawberry flavor that's clean, because every form of extraction is going to have residual pesticides, residual solvents, and so it might be all natural, right? It might even have, no offense to the USDA, the organic stamp that they don't deign to give us.
It does say
right?
some of that. It says organic, and this has been used.
Bullshit. Pardon my French. It's just not right. And I think one of the opportunities cannabis has to change our stigma is to lean the way into this clean cannabis movement that I'm really pushing.
So let's talk before we get to Papa Barkley. This is a big one. You have a cannabis clean movement going right now. So what made you start that? What happened? Tell us more about that, because I think it's needed in this industry.
So yeah, 100%. So you know what Marinol and Sativex are, right? We had those things forever.
Yes.
Those are distillate isolate compounds. What we fought for, what people got incarcerated for, was plant medicine. Now, yes, I believe the stuff in dispensary is clean, but I also believe that when you walk into a dispensary, you are no longer really being offered plant medicine. 80 to 90% of the stuff is just isolate compounds.
So let's talk about that. How much, let's call them THC analogs, like THCO, THCP, is being injected into pre-rolls and the big bazookas, hash hole products that have those in them, and they're not even listed. And people are getting couch locked, but because some of those analogs are extremely potent. So would that be under clean cannabis or not? Should it be divulged, or how do you feel about that?
So look, I think you'll appreciate this. I think folks who use, anybody who's ever grown a plant will appreciate this. One way to make sure that the farmer and the plant and the flower is honored is to not over refine it, The minute we over-refine it, we relegate that farm to biomass. We're at an inflection point in the industry now where our farms could look like vineyards, and we could build a real wine-like culture where every flower is taken care of and grown properly, so that as an extractor, all I have to do is shake it or wash it with some ice water, right? The gift of legalization is abundance. I remember questing for high extraction rates and trying to get all of it out.
Yeah.
But we don't have to do that now because we're literally overgrown. That said, I think that when we talk clean label cannabis, we want the farmer to do it right so that it's not over-refined. Because the other option, no offense to corn farmers, is that our cannabis could look like corn farms in the Midwest, being bucked down by a combine. Doesn't matter what the farmer does, doesn't matter if it's fumigated or sprayed, because it's going to go into a large stainless steel vessels like the ones that litter the floor at BizCon to be extracted down to this crystal powder. Right? The money that's coming in, we got duped in a way, and I can tell you my story because I've lived this, so I know that the reasons why. As a young formulator, my first company in Colorado, I was trying to make vape pens. I wanted to do the clear just like everybody else. I wanted to potency mindset, the notion of the one-hit wonder. Those are remnants of prohibition. I love our legacy. I love where we come from, but we also have to evolve and fix some of the things, right? And so when we think about this notion of wanting to over-refine the plant, it's like, why? We advocated for plant medicine, and the first money that we took, I love my investors, no shame to them, but they come from a model of like, how can I get IP? How can I get something unique? How can I shut the door behind me, right? And candidly, I feel like most of them were not cannabis people, not counterculture people, and viewed the customer base as essentially druggies, right? And we're like, no, just give them potency. Doesn't matter. Is it strong enough? And so to your point, all these other, Delta 8s, all these other isomers creeping in there are a function of like, I just want to make it as strong as possible because what they believe is that the consumer is just an addict. They don't see the medical value, the real data.
I agree with you. They think that they're an addict. What they don't realize is that they're a patient. I don't care, anyone that smokes cannabis, medicates with cannabis, whether they're doing it recreationally or medically, is trying to deal with a condition that they had that they don't realize. There's a trauma that came out of their life from their childhood that they're dealing with, and that helps them get through the day. And it's actually, they're all medical patients.
100%.
And this is what the money guys, the suits, whatever you want to call them, have to realize, that every single one of those folks out there, whether it's rec or whether it's medical, is a patient, and to treat them that way because they're covering up something.
Yeah.
They're dealing with something from their trauma, and they haven't got to the core yet, and that's a Band-Aid. Oh, that's fine. But cannabis is a very safe Band-Aid as compared to alcohol and all the other hard drugs that are out there. This is not a hard drug. This is a plant. You smoke it in the flower form, you're going to be okay. If you don't want to smoke it, use a vaporizer and do it that way.
No, look, at Papa Barkley, we used to say all cannabis is wellness, and one of the things that people
all cannabis is wellness.
Yeah.
That's a great line.
Yeah.
All cannabis is wellness.
I regret not bringing you this sweatshirt too now, because I'll send it to you. I'll send it to Isaiah.
Reward.
So you use cannabis, and anybody that's used cannabis regularly knows that like the reason why I never say words like recreational and the words like or the words medical or is those are two at like extreme. Okay, if I break my leg, I need the opiates before I go into shock. It's like afterwards I'll use cannabis over Advil or something like that because it's natural. Similarly, if I want to be blackout drunk, I can drink for that or something else for that, to your point. I don't care how veteran a drinker you are, at one point you can always have one shot too many before the lights go out. Anybody that's used cannabis on a regular basis knows at one point there's only so high you can get. And a lot of newbies can't get their head around this, right? But at one point, like even now as an older person, I'm sure you're the same way, I think about when I smoke because that is my opportunity and I'm stingy about it now. A lot of times people are like, oh, look, here, try this, smoke this. I'm like, you know what? I want to keep a fresh head, not because I can't operate on cannabis, but because nowadays when I smoke, I'm going to get that one lift and I'm going to enjoy it. And it's going to be my time to have harmony and peace. And then after that, that's not what it does, right? And so to me, to say recreational, we don't abuse cannabis. Like, it's not about constantly getting high.
No, it's not.
And because we live in an over-medicated society, everybody I know, my friend, I won't mention his name, but I went to college with him, one of the first computer scientists. Right now, he can't use cannabis because he programs,
some national defense stuff.
That recognizes like the different shapes of tanks and planes. Like he's been doing that, since we left college in RIT.
And by the way, if they let him smoke cannabis, he'd probably be better at the job at certain
100%. He's probably on something else. He used to sit there with this bong that he had gotten from Amsterdam called El Presidente, like this big footer, back when we used to have the trays to like separate the seeds and whatnot, and just smoke and code. And so I don't know if you ever met these people that have like the ADHD that smoke and then all of a sudden get laser focused and could just sit there for hours, right? So he would have gotten something else. Yeah, he would have gotten some other medication. So to your point, people that use cannabis regularly have found that awesome non-toxic plant that helps them in whatever their journey is. And if they didn't have that, we would have inserted something else that has no stigma that people don't even talk about. Right. We were blessed to do this survey with Survey Research Group with 2,000 participants. Most of them denied their cannabis use at first. Then they always had like some story about college, but all of them were on some kind of like anti-anxiety, Advil PM, all these other drugs that we just take for granted as normal that we don't even really mention or talk about. Oh, yeah. Toxic as hell, addictive as hell, and just freely dispensed. Meanwhile, cannabis that has a clean bill of health still is vilified today.
I had a friend who was on 22 different pills and got him down to one with using cannabis. I use cannabis every evening to self-reflect right before I go to bed and have a nice night's sleep.
Yeah. So yeah, it's like it changes day. Like now I have a nice lab. I live luckily.
A lab. Good for you.
I moved to Humboldt, so we get to walk in the forest.
Oh, you're way up there.
Yeah. Oh, wow. So I'll tell you about the Papa Barkley story and how we got to Humboldt and why we established base there.
Sure.
And of course that's why the concentrates are so good because we're right by the farms.
I want to talk to you about. You're an extraction expert. We'll get to that in a second too, because I'm guessing you're an expert at that before Papa and Barkley's, right?
Yeah.
All right, so keep going.
So anyway, my thing is at the end of the day, 5:30, 6 o'clock, I take the dog out for a walk. I usually roll a nice fatty.
What kind of dog do you have?
It's a black lab, yeah.
Oh,
COVID dog too. So we got it during
great.
COVID.
Labs are such great dogs, aren't they?
Yeah. He's amazing, and we just walk through the forest. I get my steps in, I smoke, and by the time I come back, I'm a completely different person. I'm just relaxed. All the cortisol is pushed down, and I'm present to my family. Yes. Right? Literally. Now,
do you find it suppresses your ego? For me, it suppresses my ego. 100%. I realize, and I'm able to work through that.
For all the men out there that you have to puff their chest out at work and be authoritarians at work, which is and ladies for that matter. I'm sorry, it's just not men. When we used to stop at the bar, and I don't know that helps, but if you decide to change your routine and go for a walk and smoke cannabis, that's exactly what happens. You come back and your ego is softened, and so you don't have to push that on your family. Correct. You can be vulnerable to your family. You can be present to your family. Yes. I'm a diehard advocate. I could tell you that I believe in, like Jack said, hemp will save the world. Yes. Hemp could save our nation. And, people always want to talk about the strength of the American family. Well, I think more moms, that whole mom culture around using cannabis, and dads as well, we could all be more vulnerable at home and more present at home. Yeah. Beats Valium and beats alcohol. It's not that I don't drink as much now because of just my age.
The studies are coming out now because of alcohol, what it does to the brain. It is a lot worse than people ever imagine.
It brings the demon into the household. We know that. And I'm not saying that we should ban it. I know that's what the suffrage movement tried to do when every man in America was apparently getting drunk at the turn of the century.
Ask any police officer that goes to a domestic call. If the guy it's always alcohol. It's not the cannabis smokers.
I would say probably never. Yeah. And because of the stigma and the shame, if there is a cannabis statistic, I would dispute that and say alcohol was also involved, right? Yeah. But alcohol is the primary, but they see a joint in the ashtray and they're like, oh, it was reefer madness. It's like, come on, you guys.
Alcohol is the gateway drug.
Yeah.
Kids do that. They see their parents doing it. Yep. They see them. It alters their state. Everyone seems to accept the altered state of mind. So I'll give it a try too.
It's exalted. We can't even advertise. People can say whatever they want on social media. We can't advertise cannabis. Meanwhile, in our normal mainstream media in America, there is not a cop show, a lawyer show, a doctor show that at one point in the episode at work, they open up the drawer and pull out a bottle of alcohol. Think about that. That's Every true. Single show and sitcom, there's always a celebratory drink. Yeah. We have indoctrinated our entire society into accepting alcohol for no apparent reason. Yeah. Meanwhile, to smoke a joint on TV, is like the whole world's on fire for some reason.
So you've been in cannabis for 25 years. Is that accurate?
Yep.
And you started out as an extractor?
I started out as a cultivator, and kudos to Advanced Nutrients. Again, like I told you at BizCon, it's like I really feel that the work you did, when we look back, we would not have an industry without it, right? Because I remember being a young grower. I remember coming here when I got my job at Paramount, seeing like what was going on in the 215 system, and I had a little bungalow in Chinatown, right? Had a back bedroom, so my first 2 lights, right? You know, yes, we're growing tomatoes, but having an easy 3-part nutrient regimen and having it kind of laid out, all the money spent in high times and the advertisements and those editorial articles, right?
Oh, you read
all
those.
That, of course. That's how we got.
Six-page
Remember,
ads
it was before
just talking about
there was
what
no
it does.
internet.
Yeah.
Remember, all our information came from that, right? And so I don't think I would have been able to become a cultivator or learn. You started, in a way, for me, our school of hard knocks, right? So I didn't go to school to learn cultivating. I started by reading and learning from folks like Advanced Nutrients, like, how do I grow this plant, right? How do I make that magic happen, right? And so 2 lights become 4 lights, become no doc loans, and I become a cultivator, to say the least. And around 20, and of course, the thing about cultivating is you have a lot of trim. So of course, at the beginning, we're making hash, we're making bubble hash, we're making keef, we're pressing keef, we're doing all this kind of stuff, right? And then at one point, the internet does start, and I'm a big webjucator even till today. And so I'm on back then what they call the forums, and
Overgrow, a THC farmer.
Exactly, and shout out to Grey Wolf and Skunk Farms and whatnot. And I hear about this little thing called butane. And I'm like, what's that about, right? And you start thinking about like, oh, I get it. And of course I started doing basic alcohol tinctures and whatnot. And so by 2010, we're making all different kinds of extracts, but it's difficult at dispensaries because there's no learning curve. So flower has always been king. Flower is king of dispensaries, and without giving too much away, yes, I know you're only supposed to be part of one collective, and yes, you're only supposed to grow 99 plants, and yes, that's what I did, actually, kind of.
We know that games are still being played today.
Exactly.
All right.
But, it was awesome. Cannabis has been amazing to me. It was an amazing time. Sometimes I wish we could just go back.
What was your favorite strain when you were cultivating?
Well, I grew a strain, name game, that was an OG that had a pineapple tone. So
great.
Of course, at one point, first we were calling it just OG, then we called it Pineapple OG, then we called it Pineapple Express, then we called it Terminator OG. All the same strain, right? I also had a pre-98 Bubba, which was one of my favorite strains, right?
Listen, pre-98 Bubbas, man, I loved those strains.
And that cut is still around. I kept it around and made sure that it was incubated in people, and it's a great yielder, right? So all the reasons, right? And this pineapple OG cut that I had was also a good yielder because that made sense, right? And back, and I want to make sure.
They made a movie called Pineapple Express.
That's when we switched the name.
Advanced Nutrients was the technical advisors for that show. It was so cool.
And so of course, classic Hollywood, right? Drafting off the name and, getting into dispensaries, making sure that you could get that. And at one point, I did have a person that helped me move some of these, and the name stopped being super important. But I had those 2 cuts. I wanted to grow kind of like back then we were still saying sativa or citrusy flavor and an herbal flavor. I tried, of course I grew Blue Dream at one point.
Sure.
But those were my 2 primary cuts for many, many years, right? And the first time I saw a vape pen, of course, my partner and I, who is a great gentleman who had Crohn's disease, so I've always had that medical overtone between Montel, and my longtime growing partner had Crohn's disease, Harvard educated, a brilliant person, but because of the Crohn's, could not really work the 9 to 5 at time, also from New York. So when he came here, originally was one of these guys that didn't want to get the script. It was like and I was like, dude, but I had been on submarines. We didn't really talk about my military. I was like, I'm a known.
What the hell did you do in the Navy?
I was like, I'm a known quantity.
Were you working one of those nuclear reactors in the sub or what?
Yeah.
Really?
Well, I didn't work the nuclear reactor, but I can say that I've been warmed by the glow of the reactor. I fear not nuclear power. That's a whole other concept. The notion that people are constantly complaining about.
I personally think that they should have these small nuclear reactors that they're talking about. Amazon's making one, and Gates has got another one going. I think the country should be full of those because it costs 3 cents a kilowatt hour for nuclear power versus 6 cents for coal.
Yeah, exactly. Never mind the climate.
And here's the thing: China's building 20 nuclear reactors right now, and if they have electricity at 3 cents a kilowatt hour, and we're at 6 cents, we just lost.
Yeah.
They have to get to this fission or fusion power as quickly as possible, and they are there now. They can now put in
and we should be investing.
Should
be the way they're going to get there is if we adopt nuclear power, we'll make it cleaner. We'll make every industry gets better. But with the fact that we shied away from it, and yes,
they use pebble bed technology now, which the nuclear reactors today are much different than those in the past. Extremely safe and clean power.
100%. Like, look, I'm fairly healthy now, knock on wood, and I can tell you that I spent a good portion of my life walking down this, like on a submarine. I was on a 688 class. When you go from forward to aft, there's a hallway where you're not supposed to linger, and you have that little dosimeter, and it's really warm, right?
Really?
And that's the reactor. And, you know, it's still a steam. I don't know if a lot of people know this. When you say a nuclear-powered ship, it's still a steam-powered ship. So we're just using it for heat, to pour water.
That's it. So it's really just steam locomotion.
Yeah. Some things change, some things don't.
Wow.
But, yeah, it's a good technology. It should be the thing. And needless to say, that science and like fact-based thinking has always been there for me. And so seeing that first vape pen, I was like, you know what?
So wait a minute. Let's go back to vape pen. What year is this you saw the first vape pen?
This is like 2010, 2011 when I first see the first e-cig, right? So the minute I see the first e-cig, I'm like, oh, we got to jump into that, right? And so I come up with my partner, our first propylene glycol-based cannabis thing. So it's basically light hydrocarbon extract with propylene glycol, and boom, we have a vape product.
Well, wait,
right?
Is this the beginning of Papa Barkley's, or?
Oh, no. I had a whole company before Papa Barkley.
This is you doing your own thing, okay.
Yeah. So this is nobody's lighting, it's illegal everywhere still, right? We're still undercover. And so, you know, yes, we're starting to, we don't even hardly see vape pens in dispensaries yet at this time. I started sending a few back to New York, and of course, all these VCs who had never smoked flower start using the vape pen and getting good night's sleep. These guys never sleep, and they're like, everybody wants to write checks. Proposition 19 had just failed here, and Colorado was about to do their referendum.
Right.
So I get a call from these folks, and they're like, I'm like, there's nothing to do in California. I'm good. Like, you know, it's crazy here, right? You can't brand, because you remember the guys that were branding the little chocolates, like kind of looking like Nestle and like ripping them off?
Oh, yeah.
And then they got all busted, tainted.
And York Mints and all those guys, Reese's Pieces. And I always wonder, I go, why don't they get a cease and desist letter? They didn't for like 2 decades.
Yeah, so
and
all of a sudden
when cannabis became a thing, they started receiving letters.
Yeah, we got a slap on the wrist, like anybody that was trying to brand. And then, of course, you know, I had a friend of mine tell me, he's like, why would you put your name on it? We could be chased back to you. And SC Labs, shout out to SC Labs, was first starting to give us those little stickers because we were self-testing. Like, we've always been somewhat a self-regulating industry, but I got kind of like stepped back from the whole branding. So when these guys were like, oh yeah, we should create something, I was like, there's no branding in California. It's not ready. Like, things are not good. Right. So they said, what do you know about Colorado? I was like, well, besides units moving east, stopping on the way east, I don't really know. Yeah. They're like, well, can you come check this out? Yeah. I want to say to the community that I learned and I would not do these things. I know what a distressed asset is now and what that means to the person who is distressed.
Right. Yeah.
But we found this location that was a bakery. This woman didn't have the wherewithal to figure out how to get licensed. So she sold her her bakery for a song. I think it was like something like $300,000. I then went on, fake it till you make it, to convert that dispensary to a Class 1 Div 1 lab, working with the fire department, one of the first to do it. By the time the regulations came out, the only 2 vape pens on the market were O-Pen, and shout out to Ralph Morgan, those guys, because they are marketers. I learned a hard lesson there, and us. We had a vape pen called Neos. I did all the branding, right? I got this $4 million from these folks and basically set up the lab, made the vape pen, did all the marketing, distributed. I knew I had to taste your product than the CO2 and the carbonic acid that was that shitty vape pen. But kudos to, you know, the folks at O-Pen, because they had the branding game on lock. And that's what wins, you know? So I got a front row education on why branding, regardless, yes, product is good, and being a formulator and a cook, you can have pride in your product, but if you don't have a good book cover, you're going nowhere.
That's right.
And you can blame it on the public, you can blame it on whoever you want, but those are some facts that I had to just make peace with. So yeah, for a few years, we were just selling into a vacuum. It was like salad days of like what is this? Everybody wanted a vape pen, right? And we're all using that same technology. Luckily, I met, shout out to V Nice at Shenzhen Technologies and Flower and Alvin, her husband. You know, I met those folks early on, communicating in the middle of the night with them in China and getting my carts. And like, they've grown their business and they were at BizCon now. So it's been a long journey, Mike, right? So this is like 2011, 2012, right when Colorado's turning over, 2013-ish. And so, yeah, so us and OPEN are battling it out. I don't know if you know the guys at Grasslands.
Heard of them.
Right, so Ricardo, shout out to Ricardo, was working in the Denver Post doing their cannabis column. He interviews me, and so you can see on YouTube, here it is, I'm defending light hydrocarbon, right? Like against CO2 and, you know, talking about carbonic acid, talking about how they have to refine in alcohol, and they're still having like 1,000 parts per million residual alcohol, but we're having non-detected, and butane is clean technology. Just being who I am, right? So that's when I really start to become known as an extractor, right? Like really understanding how to work my vac oven, you know, to purge but yet keep terpenes in, right? Knowing that terpenes are where flavor should come from, right? And that a vape should be able to distinguish between like, oh, that's obviously a pineapple-y citrus strain, and that's obviously an earthy, gassy strain, right? Yeah, and so I'm just in it. And of course, we're, you know, now the clear is coming out, potency is coming out. At one point, all I wanted was that short pass distillation machine. I remember the last big conversation I had with my investors in Colorado was like, we need to figure out a way to get this device. I need to get another space. You don't understand. Distillation is going to be everything, right? But what the climate then? In Colorado, you couldn't plant outdoors yet. We were all still growing inside. So we were still in very much that scarcity mindset. The product itself was still scarce. So of course we wanted to get I remember doing papers for folks and being like, I can get the max extraction rate. If it says 20%, that means it's 20% oil by weight. I'm gonna get a 20% extraction rate. I'm gonna get every single trichome out of this flower. And I became really good at that with butane. Then I met my partner, Adam, at Papa Barkley. This is about 2015. I met him through another great gentleman, Sparky Wilson Rose, another OG dispensary cat who had paid the ultimate price in our industry. And when he had just got out, and was, you know, he wanted to just get out of California, but he had like a year probation here or whatnot. Sure. He became a really good advisor to me. And one of the dudes he knew from Washington was this guy, Adam Grossman. He's like, hey, my buddy's been soaking flowers in coconut oil. It seems to work for his dad. You know, you should talk to him. So of course now I've learned all these words from my VC friends. So the minute I see him, I'm like, oh yeah, no, you're not going to do that. Let me show you how to put this extract in it. This is how we scale it, you know, and I got all the fancy words now, right? Sure enough, we did it, and the product just did not work as well, right? As a topical, I now know that chlorophyll is a natural liposome, and that's what helps the cannabis migrate through the dermis and actually give you that instant efficacy from a topical, right? At the time, I didn't know that. All I knew is when I put light hydrocarbon or a BHO extract in coconut oil versus the plant-soaked coconut oil, one you rub on and you're like, yeah, it smells good. Maybe it's working. And another one, it was like, oh, wait, yeah, it's obvious that this little pain I had is gone, right? So all of a sudden I had this aha moment, like, wait a minute, I've been advocating for years before this for plant medicine, and out of this need to compromise, to legitimize and have this lab coat, I immediately started doing what I railed against in terms of pharma. Like my lab was starting to look more and more like a pharmaceutical lab, and my inputs were starting to look more and more like active pharmaceutical ingredients and less like plant medicine. And I was just like, wait, that's odd. Why would I do that? And now by this time, California is about to do something, right? We're in 2015. Things are getting really good here. Other states have already started to come on, and I start to realize, wait a minute, the gift of legalization is freeing the plant in abundance, not over-refining and trying to scrap for milligrams. And yeah, Adam and I then all of a sudden were like, oh, the obvious guardrail of our Papa Barkley is going to be clean from start to finish. Because the minute we were like, well, the plant needs to be 100% clean, and we're going to do these natural infusions that don't use any chemicals, chemical-free, it was like, oh. And then, of course, we get our first test back, and we're like getting hit for this pesticide. I'm like, what the fuck is this? Well, beeswax, the majority of our bees are inoculated with this thing called Coumaphos, which is generally regarded as safe. But it's a banned pesticide in cannabis. It has to be non-detected, right? Other products can have up to 6,000 parts per million in the real world, right? For us, not detected. Try finding beeswax that doesn't have coumaphos. We had to go all the way to some farm in Oregon that was off the road and only get his caps, because the caps are done every year, but the comb is like, stays in there for like 7 to 10 years. So all of a sudden I'm like, wait a minute. All this other stuff is so dirty, and like if I'm doing clean cannabis, it becomes so hard to find essential oils. I won't name any names of the popular companies, but if you think your essential oils are clean and natural now, do a spot test and see what happens. I can tell you how hard we had to work to find clean essential oils that would test in the cannabis world. It is not easy, right? Vitamin E that tests clean in the cannabis world, especially at a percentage where it's efficacious, like 3-4% of your formula, so that it really makes your skin soft. Those things were all difficult.
So where did you go? Did you try aromatherapy companies all around the world that produce the different?
Yeah. I have to give our good friend Jamie Solario, who was our procurement guy at the time, really knocking on doors, and Pranile, our production manager. Like, it was definitely a team effort, because at one point we thought we were stuck. I was already reformulating with shea butter, trying to figure out how to get the hardness of this balm, because we were not going to.
So at Papa Barkley's, your first product was a balm, right?
Yeah. It was our hero product, because the marketers loved it, that we had this true origin story that Papa, Adam
Grossman's
Grossman's dad,
the logo was great.
That's Sparky Wilson Rose at Supercritical.
And was that your dog on the front?
Yeah, so Papa and the dog and Barkley are real people. Papa is Adam Grossman's dad.
Okay.
And basically Papa was on hospice with stenosis of the back. And they were like, if he doesn't get out of bed and start functioning, he's probably going to pass away. So out of desperation, Adam had taken inhalable grade flowers, soaked them in coconut oil, rubbed it on his dad's back, and sure enough, his dad got out of hospice, lived several years after, enough to see the formulation. Yes. Barkley was his like companion dog, and you know how old folks get cold, he would get up under the covers and keep Papa warm, right? And so even when we named it Papa and Barkley, we're like, is this a good name? And that's when again, Sparky, what isn't a name? Nike, any name. A name is like a flag, and a flag has to be championed and stand for something. So we're like, no, we are going to name it Papa and Barkley, and we're going to stand for something, and we're going to stand for clean, chemical-free, from start to finish formulations, right? And we did that in the topical. Then we did it in the tinctures. Then we did it in the capsules. Then we did it in the patch. Then I did it in the edibles, and then of course, we did it in the topical and the tinctures, and then, because I was younger then and had a little ego and was in the community, I had to flex on fools that I'm still a purveyor of real cannabis oil, and we dropped the hash products, right? So we went into the ice water hash with our Papa Select, just to let people know that this is about creating a clean product, right? Baskets of fruit, that 6-star hash with all, like, this is what cannabis medicine is. All you need to do is shake it off or wash it off. All the other bullshit that I had been doing, I was like, that's what that is. That's not correct.
So, So I was a friend of Mike Rosen. He's since passed away, and he was he built Herbalife from 10 million to 2 billion a year. And we were talking about you, and specifically Papa Barkley's. And he said, here's what Papa Barkley's has done right. They had one breakout product. And once you get that one breakout product, people trust you, and you can bring out another product, another product, another product. Advanced Nutrients was built the same way. We started with Carbolode. So what was that breakout product that put you on the map?
Yeah, no, we got that advice.
What was it?
It's so funny. It's funny you bring up Herbalife. My good friend Bonnie Tommy was a marketing person there for a long time and worked with us. But Ken Landis, the gentleman who started Bobby Brown Cosmetics, on the kudos to him, pulled us aside and said, you have to go narrow and deep and be known for something and plant your flag, and then you can break out. And so we did that with cannabis, with the topical, and our motto back then was owning the first cannabis conversation, right? Because dispensaries were just about to start to be legal, right? So we raised money, I like to say this, that our original Friends and Family was before the vote in 2016. So in the summer, we were already in the dispensary network in the 215s, moving this product with a handful of investors behind us before 2016. But when we decided to, and at the time, Papa Barkley was selling vape pens at the same time. And we dropped that because we wanted to focus on this topical and have this first conversation to bring newbies in. The reason why I think we got so well known in California is we were driving a different customer, a new customer, to dispensaries by having this first conversation, doing the senior bus tours, right? Encouraging folks that were hardened cannabis users to take this topical and have that conversation with their family, because the non-psychoactive nature of an efficacious THC-rich product is like, oh, you have a little tennis elbow? You rub this on there all of a sudden you feel better and you have a different perspective of what cannabis can be. Right? Then you're more likely to take the CBD tincture. You take that for a few days, all of a sudden your inflammation is lowered. You're like, oh, there's something there. And I've seen their art go from topical to tincture to vape pen to gummies to understanding how cannabis can go into their life, right? You know the folks up north at Canaccord, those bankers, right?
Oh, yeah.
Like all zero cannabis, like trying to be... I go to this Canaccord event.
Yeah.
I'm a product maker, so I don't take business cards. I bring my product with me.
Right.
At one point, we're chopping it up, and it's clear that I'm the legacy guy. I'm not the suit guy.
Right.
But I slide this guy. He's talking about his playing tennis, like total rich people shit, right? I slide him a 5-gram sample of the bomb. I'm like, well, check it out. Let me know what you think.
Right.
The entire conference, every time I see him, he's waving to me, pointing at his elbow, how much better it feels, right?
There you go.
That was the first cannabis conversation. So we went narrow and deep on the topical, really leaned into talking about how the medicinal side, the wellness side of cannabis. It did give us a little crisis about, oh, we're a wellness company, and is that because back then it was very hard to indoctrinate the newbies into all cannabis is wellness. Right? Back then we started, because we raised a lot of money, we were forced in a way, I won't say forced, because I met a lot of people like Angela Pye, like I met a lot of good people that are still in our industry today, but we hired folks who had CPG resumes, experience selling products, but no experience in cannabis, right?
Goods.
Yeah, and these people were like, oh, you need 1 milligram gummies. You're not the average audience, right? And at that point, that's when I came out with my term like, oh, I know I'm not the average audience, but the only person qualified to meet the consumer where they are those of us who know where we're going, because we are going somewhere, right? Like you might be new to cannabis, but you're not going to be on a 1 milligram gummy for day one. Just like in high school, one beer might have been a big deal for you and your friends. And before you know it, you're toting around your own 6-pack, right? It's like there's an art to these things that I felt that some of the new money coming in was short-sighted. One, because they had this other thing that I realized called prohibition shame, right? Or cannabis shame. Like,
prohibition shame. Yeah,
well, where they come in and they don't realize how programmed that they are to be hands off at cannabis and how like demonized it is. Really? That they say things like 1 milligram gummy and like, we can't really do that. It's like, no, cannabis is safe and non-toxic. That's the real data and you should lean into it. Everything else you've been programmed, unless you look at yourself and realize that you have cannabis shame, you need to let that go. And recently I was at this Black Cannabis Expo and I said this for their audience. I was like, if somebody qualifies their cannabis use to me, I freak out now because it's like saying you have a black friend. Don't tell me, oh, I just use it in the evening. Like you've heard that. You've heard people say it like that. It's like when you're saying it like that, you're qualifying it as if you're doing something bad, as if it's something that like...
That's in the beginning I said to you, I use it for sleep and self-reflection.
Yeah. That is what
I shouldn't have to say it. I just said, I use cannabis.
Yeah. Yeah. But even in the tone, you know what I mean. Like,
I get it though.
Tone is
I get
everything,
it.
right?
And you brought up shame and maybe a little bit of guilt, and because we came out of the black market, it just occurred to me when you said that actually is extremely valid, and I'm going to have to self-reflect on that this evening.
Yeah. And overlay it onto our industry. It's why our industry is going the way it is. We are now in the phase of compromising to legitimize. We so desperately want to be accepted by our CBG brethren, and we want it to look the same, and that's why we're focusing on active pharmaceutical ingredients. That's why we haven't even gotten plant medicine right, and you have folks going down trying to find IP and novel ways of doing things, and it's like, okay, listen, that's not our community. That's not what we were trying to do.
I was in a company, and I watched them. It was like being in some kind of wild, like super futuristic movie. I walk into this room and there's these big, huge bags, and they're growing resveratrol in there, and it just looked like something out of a movie. Then he takes me to another room. He's got bags that are smaller, but they're growing trichomes, strain-specific trichomes.
Wow.
There's 2 companies I know right now that have technology to grow just trichomes in a big liquid bag. It's clear, and you can see them in there. They have the strain names on there. And I asked them, how long does it take to do that, to program any strain that you can grow? They said it was about 9 to 18 months, and they were condensing that down. Yeah. You'll have no idea what's going to come. But I want to go back to Papa Barkley's real quick. You had a wooden cap, and I thought that was one of the coolest things. It made it feel clean. It made it feel wholesome. And more because of the label, the dog, the guy, the cap, that you could trust the brand. And when I opened it up, and I smelled the concentrate. I went, these guys have hit a grand slam. This is a great product.
Thank you.
And it started with the one breakout product, and then from there you added the different concentrates. Out of all the lines that you came out with, or Papa Barkley's, which one was your most successful?
The topicals definitely killed it, and then I would say the concentrates would be second, and then we started getting traction with the gummies, and I'd have to ask our friends at Mammoth now. I would assume they're doing better. Since rosin gummies have become much more accepted and people can pay a little bit extra for that. Yeah. But definitely the topical, and then secondly, the concentrates for sure. Really? It's interesting for us, like the wooden top, the packaging, all of it. I just, at one point, got this realization that cannabis is coming into the consumer products goods world with a lot of knowledge, right? What's already in the zeitgeist? Sustainability, clean, right? Less packaging, all these fair trade, all these things companies are trying to do to make themselves relevant, whether it's Coca-Cola, whether it's McDonald's, all of them. And I'm like, well, if we're coming into the industry at this point, shouldn't we embody all those lessons? Even though I saw most of my colleagues going the opposite way, over packaging, still using banned chemicals and dyes, over sugaring, using all kinds of preservatives. And I'm like, but wait, we already know that the public is moving away from that. Why wouldn't we do that? So all the values of Papa Barkley were like, modern values. Every time packaging came up, we came up with this phrase, if you know better, you do better. You come to me and you tell me, oh, this packaging, even though it's paper, it has plasticizers in it, so it's actually not recyclable. I'm like, oh, thank you for telling me. I'll fix that. And so we started doing the little like corrugated packaging. The jar, everybody was like, oh, that's a significant thing. I'm like, yeah, but it's glass and bamboo. Two things that I know are going to be recyclable. It could have been a plastic top. Everybody else uses a plastic top, but do we need more plastic?
So that wood was bamboo. That's what it was made of. That was nice.
And then luckily, at one point, it was going to have plastic inside because we were going to have to do the child-proofing. Right. And I was like, child-proofing on a bomb? And we were just, back then it was the BCC, just going crazy. And then finally they were like one-time child-proofing, so it was just the plastic seal. But like the notion that you had to constantly, like nobody was going to eat this bomb, right? It was like crazy. So yeah, it's been an interesting journey.
What about, I see some people when they grow cannabis, they treat it like it's a weed. I see some money guys have the same kind of thing. And they don't realize that the plant needs TLC. So tell us about tender loving care and growing plants. What did you find out about that?
It's funny that you say that, because I used to say to my workers that TLC is more important than the THC. And it really is, right? And that analogy that I used about the wine vineyard versus, a huge, field of corn, the difference is in that TLC that's taken to grow each and every plant, right? And what I've been telling investors now, because look, some of our jobs are to make products and other jobs are to finance and make money. And how do we speak that language? Margins, right? And what I've said to them is like, if we skip over this culture step, we're just going to be selling low margin products forever, like Bud Light.
And you're right. We're going to get to commitment to purity in a second. I talked to one guy when we were at MJ Biz, a huge multi-MSO, and they go, oh yeah, it's about, we want to grow the cheapest product we possibly can, and we're selling $8 eighths. And I just didn't have the time. I wanted to sit him down and just go, let me explain some things to you. I don't care what category you're in. There's always good, better, and best.
That's right.
You want beer? Yeah, you can get Pabst Blue Ribbon. You can get Michelob, or you can get Heineken. It is cars. You can get a Volkswagen. You can get a Chevy Impala. You can go and buy a Ferrari. There's like I don't care what the category is. You've got good, better, and best.
That's right.
And there is always a category. In fact, the best category to be in is at the very top of that, because it gets less impacted during down times.
That's right.
And so that comes out with tender loving care to the plants, and then consistent purity. So let's talk about that. Yeah. How do you ensure consistent purity? What do the people listening to this show have to understand, especially the money people, that it does make a difference? and you just don't throw out any kind of ag fertilizer on it and treat it like a weed and harvest it and say it's going to be biomass anyway. Well, what happened to, take pride in your fucking work.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Look,
take pride in your work.
We have an analogy right there, right in front of us.
And purity is one of them.
And the wine culture is right there, right? So think about wine. There's box wine that you can buy for $7-8, and yes, or Bud, the beer analogy, Bud Light's the most popular.
You got $2 Chuck, you got Gallo, you got Screaming Eagle, and Harlan Estates.
You also have like Francis Coppola wine, right? That's grown, and all of a sudden he gets $800-900 a bottle for some reason. Like that's a huge margin. How do we build that? Well, you have to build it. You have to educate folks and let them know. But when it comes to purity and the reason why, it's quite simple. We are harvesting trichomes. So wine farmers harvest grapes, and the grapes we can see them. If we all of a sudden put big microscopic lenses on our faces, we would look at the trichomes and they would be just like grapes, right?
Oh, they are. We've done that. We've done 50, and we've shown our competitors' trichomes and our trichomes. In fact, we had a show here with Kat from CMS, and Zoom Gardens took these pictures of advanced nutrients-grown trichomes and all the rest of them.
Right. They're right there for the harvest.
Huge difference. Even the bricks, our bricks is higher, but visually with your eye, you can see the difference, the chemical structure inside of the trichome and how the trichome head has developed on the stock, which makes it easier if you're going to do hash to break it off and so.
That is our fruit, right? And
yes.
I think what most, because we're still having that shame, most people will see the leaf and they don't understand where the medicine comes from. If I were to say to an investor that really didn't know anything, I'm like, we're harvesting something that's right there on the surface and ready to be plucked. And if we use that, if we take TLC so that it's clean, now I can show that to somebody as a basket of like what I call 6-star hash, right? This notion that we don't have a top shelf of premium is because we haven't built it yet. It's right.
By the way, that's starting to happen. Eastwood Gardens grows with advanced nutrients organically, and they're in 4 dispensaries, and those 4 dispensaries have now an ultra premium class that they sell advanced growing, organically grown, consumer organic line, and it sells out so fast. There is a category where people want clean, pure product that's growing properly.
Absolutely. On the flower side, it's a little bit easier because it's a flower and we just know that flower is curated. It's when we start to get in the value-added products, your vape pens, your gummies, your chocolates, all the other things that folks want to do, right? Well, this term solventless that we use in the industry, which I saw at BizCon for the first time 3 years ago, and I was like, yes, finally, people are starting to talk about solventless. Solventless or clean label or clean extraction means the farmer did it right.
And so how do they extract it so is it clean? Is it using CO2? Is it what is it? What is it?
I won't get it. There are 3, to me, in my opinion, there are really only 3 clean extraction methodologies.
All right.
There's mechanical separation, which is ancient as hell. What is mechanical separation? We chill the plant, we shake it, we put it in our tumblers, and all those crystals start coming through. Okay. We use our sifting technology, and now we have a basket of fruit.
Like bubble hash.
Yeah. Bubble hash is the next one. So that's that's water extraction, right? Where the plant is dried. Or now we can talk about the fresh frozen rage, right. Or whether it's fresh frozen or whether it's dried product. We wash it with ice water to freeze those little trichomes, break them up. We use our sifting, our mechanical separation, and again, I'm presenting you a basket of fruit. I've gotten those grapes. So how do I get those grapes? You know how they do the cranberries? You could pick them or you could flood it so that they float. You can either wash it or you can pick it. We're doing the same thing with our trichomes. And those methodologies do what? They mean the farmer had to do it right. No crazy foliar sprays, no letting dogs run amok, like no dust, no atmospheric particulates, like clean, individual plants and trichomes, just like you see a grape farm, fully curated so that I can just pluck the fruit however I'm going to do it. The last one, which I'm a big fan of, is lipid infusion or the using of a solubilizing trichomes in a fat. As ancient as Bang, like remember the Indian milk product?
Oh, yeah.
Or using coconut oil or using hemp seed oil, whatever you're doing, you soak those flowers, and that also lends into this notion of whole plant. Papa Barkley's tinctures, best in the marketplace. I think I can say that pretty definitively. Why? Because instead of using an extract or something, we use all aerial parts of the plant, soak them in coconut oil, and not only get out the trichomes, but get out fats, plant nutrients, phytonutrients, chlorophyll, all those things get seeped out into the lipid and make for a very powerful tincture. It's not unlike RSO because warm alcohol does the same thing. It doesn't just pull out the trichomes, it pulls out all other parts of the plant that really make for a powerful concoction, right? Those three are all clean methodologies that means the farmer did it right. And when the biomass, if you want to call it that, is so abundant that the price is falling through the floor and farmers can't even eat, one way to empower our farmers and one way to make sure the industry goes right is to honor that plant, let farmers farm awesome, what some people call inhalable grade flowers, and use those throughout every process. At the very least, for the top shelf, for the good, better, best. I'm not saying that distillate vape pens won't be like the Bud Light and won't be the fastest selling. Or I had another young lady the other day at Benzinga we're on a panel tell me, well, you know, all the young kids in the demographics that we're looking for, 25 to 35, they want grape flavor vape pens, they want convenience. I'm like, yeah. I also used to drink Mad Dog 2020 when I was a kid. I don't do that now.
And Boone's Farm.
Yeah, you know, it's like, where are the adult brands in cannabis? Where's the next step? Where's that cabinet in the dispensary that's locked because those products are special, right? You can walk into a liquor store, you can walk into a Best Buy, and you don't have to ask what's in that special room or what's in that locked cabinet. You know it's special, and you might ask. And what I would tell a rich investor is, do you drink scotch? Do you drink whiskey or champagne? Why do you pay extra for those other brands?
Correct.
Why do you pay extra for single malt? Because it's how it was done. That counts in our world. And so when I say to you solventless, like at Papa Barkley, we didn't automate. Not to say pure pressure, shout out to the folks at Low Temp. They all have great automated devices, and I love that technology. But to say that we were hand rowing in our ice buckets like we used to, and that we then hand catch these baskets of fruit and then put them in the jar for you and have a cold supply chain, right? All that effort, if I can educate you on that, you're gonna pay more, just like you pay more for single malt scotch that was done in, they chose to do a single straight. I don't even know that it tastes better. I'm a Johnny Black person myself, right? But I'll go with the single malts. Yeah, their one profile as opposed to that heavy peatiness. I don't know. But the notion of nerding out on things. I think when people start to pay more money, whether it's for fashion or whatever, you ever have that friend that knows the designer, knows everything, knows all the couture line, and spends $1,000 for a t-shirt, right? Same thing with the wine friend or the beer nerd. Where's that in our industry? You know, I have to say Jocelyn Shellstraw at Buddhist, she recruited me recently, and at first I was like, oh, what's this? And she's like, we need critics. We need tastemakers in our industry to start to build that level of like, it's
education too.
Yeah, it's just education. And like, it's no offense to Joe Consumer or Mrs. Consumer. It's just to say that every industry has a chef, has a designer, has that person that we look to taste make, to say what's good, what's next, to educate us. And sometimes people don't want the education, they just want to believe a trusted person. In our industry, we don't have that. What we have is a race to the bottom. And I think the public's starting to feel that they're being gamed. Like,
listen, there is the quality of flower that's being grown is a race to the bottom right now. All they're worried about is bag price and this. They're not worried about the quality. Now, there's a new revolution happening where now quality matters.
Yeah.
And it's funny that people are coming back to advanced nutrients because they thought they were too expensive, but we never were too expensive. We have special pricing for commercial. We knew that. During COVID, we scaled up. We scaled up our production infrastructure to handle 5 times the amount that we're doing right now.
Nice.
Yeah, so we saw that coming.
Yeah.
And
the need for
the need for quality is there.
Yeah, every new consumer, every young person, like this vape lady was saying, is going to get educated, right? One other thing I used to love to do to investors, it was a couple of BizCons ago. We're sitting with like, you know, some of these venture capitalist folks, and I had to concentrate, and I was like, look, the difference between this is like...
Do they get it? Do they really get it?
They don't get it, but when you say things like, this is the special product, like, you might use this, you know, for yourself when you go to the river, but when your in-laws come over, I used to specifically say that, because they're all, like, the thought of their family knowing they're in cannabis, or them...
So wait, hang on. You mentioned cannabis shame. Do you find that investors have cannabis shame?
Yeah, 100%. I mean,
really?
Well, okay... It's even, they don't, this isn't, I'm making a general statement.
Sure.
So my experience of folks who have early investors in the cannabis world did no work on deprogramming or believing. They just saw a money opportunity. So they carried with them all the bullshit that they've been fed about they carry the demonization of the plant into the boardroom. And I witnessed that firsthand on more than one occasion.
That must have been very difficult to deal with.
I mean, I think there are cannabis companies that are dealing with it right now, where they try to do something premium, or they try to break out, or they try to educate, or they try to build.
There's so many MSOs. I'd love to sit down with the CEOs and go, here, let me develop a product for you that shows you just what premium can do for your bottom line.
Yeah. And maybe not today.
Or you or me or somebody else could do that all day long, and it would make a difference to our bottom line.
Maybe not today, but like we have to, that expression, we have to skate where the puck is going, or aim in front of the bird, right? I can tell you definitively that the consumer's on a journey, the same journey I was on. I started over-extracting, potency mindset, right? Thinking that we needed to do that, and fully come around to like abundance, quality, cleanliness, all those. The consumer is going to be on that journey, right? So every consumer, you want a consumer for life, right? You educate them and you get them.
So if you had to talk to a money guy right now, and you're talking to them, they watch this show, what do they need to know? Like from your standpoint, Papa and Barkley's crazy successful brand, you know what you're talking about. What should they understand that they're not understanding now? Talk to them right now.
There's a huge white space in brands that speak to adults that are looking for better products. There's a huge white space for all the newbies that are in now, all those people that are 35, that are about to be heading to 40, and starting to change that turn of life that happens at 40, 45, when you really start to clean up your diet, you start to really think about what you're doing, right?
There's more runway behind you than there is in front of you, right?
We are not speaking to them, right? And cannabis is needed for them. My wife just launched a line for women in midlife, right? Through their menopause journey, to help them sleep, to help with brain fog, all these things, right? It's like I still want to speak to that adult community. I get the Shaggy and Scooby drug culture, ha, 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 right? But the fact is, if you want to get into this industry, don't look at the money opportunity and the potential, but also look at the data that we've had since 1970 about how efficacious and how non-toxic this plant is, and try to deprogram or leave your shame of being in cannabis behind and come into it with pride, because yes, we're going to make some money, but we're also going to be doing some good. I do think there's an ability to do some good here.
You can have a quality product that does good and probably will have a longer track record of profitability than if you mess around with the bottom.
That's right. And in terms of that, so look, right now first thing I'm doing is kind of like leaning on the education, right? I want to start this clean label movement so people can understand that cannabis should be plant medicine. Like, you should be able to look.
Before we get to the clean movement, I want to talk about that. What do you absolutely love about what you do for a living?
Oh my God. Right now I am
in the cannabis space.
I live in gratitude. I live and breathe cannabis, similar to yourself. It's been my life. Now, this is what I've done for most of my adult life now.
Congratulations.
Right?
You picked a great space to be in.
Yeah.
and our space needs more guys like you. And women.
Yeah. And I live and breathe cannabis. Everything I do intersects with cannabis, right? So, of course, everybody says, oh, the new modern thing is AI. Yeah, well, I'm leveraging it to create content and education, because that's what I need to get my cannabis goals done, right? So cannabis, it's everything. And so my day job right now is all things cannabis. I'm involved in a couple of different projects, and I love it. Yeah, I'm so grateful to be able to have built something that I'm so proud of, and I am doing good. Like Papa, I never had thought to be a doctor, but Papa and Barkley gave me that sense of, like, so many people even now stop me on the street and they're just like, oh my God, your product helped me or helped my loved one. That's a different kind of thank you.
Isn't that nice?
Oh my God, if I give you a joint and you smoke it and you're like, oh, that was great, thanks, man. But if I give you something that helped you sleep better, alleviated your pain, or better yet, alleviated the pain of your loved ones, it's a whole different kind of thank you. It really, really is. And so now I find myself in this great position where I get to say things with pride that are also just good for people in the world. Like, I'm in this position where, like, you say talk to investors. I want to talk to investors about what they want to hear. You want to make money, but I also want to do good. And guess what? There just happens to be this amazing white space where we could do both.
I think there's a couple groups of investors. Ones who just care about making money, and ones who care about actually building a world-class brand and going someplace.
Yeah. And to them, I would say, let's skate where the puck is. The fact is, we're in the infancy of this, right? So in my business deck, one of the people I call out is Don Julio, right?
Okay.
Small agave farmer gets, I think it was like $200,000, now a household name. It does not happen overnight. But the household names of cannabis, I don't think they've been penned yet. Maybe Papa Barkley's one of them, maybe, right? But like the brands that we have out now, no offense to them, I don't believe they are set up or building their business model to be household names in the future, because they, at the very least, haven't even separated their business to good, better, best.
They bring out some, smart-looking packaging that applies to the demographic that they're going after, and you see quite a bit of that. And you're right, there hasn't been a world-class brand built yet in the CPG part that I can see. They're all over the map. Yeah. Papa Barkley's, you should be one of them, because you were one of the first that came out, and you did it right. The moment I opened up one of your products, I said, these guys know what the hell they're doing. Absolutely.
I think the industry is missing a little bit of like leadership. So just the other day I was on a call.
Leadership. All these guys, they're all wealthy. They got hundreds of millions. Some got billions of dollars. And they consider themselves leaders, maybe where they came from.
Yeah.
But in this industry, it's a little bit different, and they don't understand that.
Well, here's a classic example. I'm on the phone with, I'm involved in this.
And I'm not banging against the money guys. I just wish that a lot of them would just look at our space a lot differently and get rid of that cannabis shame that you talked about.
Yeah, well, it is, because it prevents them from interpreting data the correct way. So I'm involved in a dispensary project in New Jersey, right? It's going to open up. Okay. And I'm on with one of the investors, and he says this classic thing like, I don't care about culture, I'm just data-driven. And I'm like, interesting. So you're data-driven, which means because the young kids that are the first people to go to dispensaries are buying grape-flavored vape pens and sugar-rich gummies, that's where you're going to drop anchor? Where's the leadership there, right? So parsing data requires a person who has a vision. That's why I kind of saying what I said before. It's like, yes, you can look at the data, but where is it going? Where are the trends going? Most of the companies are looking at data and the headset data, what's being sold right now, and doubling and tripling down on that instead of trying to vision what the next thing should be.
The next thing hasn't even come out, and there's going to be so many more next things that are going to blow the people's minds.
Yeah. Right.
Absolutely.
And it's so funny, because then I have some investors that think what's going to blow people's minds is some nano innovation, some tech innovation, but meanwhile, we've left the basics behind. We've left this notion of clean plant medicine, the same things we're looking for in our food, sustainability, the same things we're looking for in our clothes. We've left those lessons that were learned by the other larger consumer products.
So what do you deeply desire for your business, the cannabis business? What do you deeply desire for the cannabis business?
That there's a clear separation of what clean plant medicine is, in whatever the product is. So, when people have asked me, like, say in one sentence what you would say to somebody, if you walk into a dispensary, whatever you're going to buy, if you can't see the plant in it, it's not a plant-based product. It's just that simple. Like
what does that mean if you can't see it? So for the average consumer, so when they listen to this, they know what the hell they're looking for.
For instance, you go in to buy a gummy, right?
Yes.
And you're looking at 2 gummies.
Yeah.
You want to make sure that the gummy you have is fueled with actual real plant trichomes versus an active pharmaceutical ingredient, right?
Do you think that there's honesty in advertising when it comes to that on the packaging?
Well, that's where we need to regulate our industry. It should be clear. Like it shouldn't. Right. We should not allow. So I'll just touch on the THCA hemp side.
Yeah. Okay. Our industry is now diverged, right? They got this.
That's a whole other topic.
But the reason it's growing so fast is because it's not taxed like the THC side.
Yeah, it's not licensed. Yeah.
And by the way, Germany's going to kick everybody's ass because they treat it and tax it like a normal business. America has to wake up and realize that.
Exactly.
I mean, can put a little bit of a sin tax on it, but what they're doing now is they're just opening up the black market.
Yeah. So I think that when you look at the e-commerce side, all they can say is hemp extract. What does that even mean? So we need nomenclature is important in any industry. Having exact terms and words for stuff is real, right? So if I look at the ingredients of Bud Light, they are definitely different than the ingredients of Sam Adams. One uses malt and barley, and one uses high fructose corn syrup, right? There's a big difference in those, and the terminology of what the inputs are should let the educated consumer know. More importantly, a lot of times what I say to my colleagues, it's like, okay, I'll forgive the consumer being ignorant, but I cannot forgive you as an industry colleague for allowing them to remain ignorant, and more importantly, preying on that by like letting vague words happen and just looking to see where you can sell product, as opposed to saying, no, this product is this bottom tier because it's distillate, this one is a light hydrocarbon extract, maybe it's in the middle, and this one was done by hand and really clean flowers and solid clean inputs and clean excipients, and so clearly it's a top tier. That good, better, best model needs to be encouraged from the retailers.
So how are people going to know? So you've got the Cannabis Clean movement going. How's that working for you? How do you envision making that happen? Because I think that's important. There needs to be a seal of approval that really means something when they see it on the package, that they understand that that is a clean, pure product. And if you're going to get a hemp product and it has a bunch of THC analogs, well, they should have to list, okay, this one contains THC analogs, and here's the analogs that it contains.
Yeah.
And in the ratios.
Yeah, I agree. So look, I'm not the only person. There's OCal certified. There's a couple of people that are out there. Of course, as we know, the USDA does not want to deal with this because of the federal prohibition. So that we are trying to self-regulate. I'm not trying to add to the movement, to another like club or group. All I'm simply saying is that clean label implies that the farmer did it right, and that's my first focus. Making sure that farmers in this industry are treated, again, more like wine farmers, right? What they create is a finished product. Yes, can we take that and manipulate it into other stuff?
Sure.
Sure. But there should be a version. It's kind of like if I said, don't you want the premium grapes to fuel your wine? And of course you would say yes. And then, sure, kind of like Ernest and Julio Gallo, I can take all the other grapes, right? I don't know if you saw the Ken Burn documentary, all the different grapes, blend them, and have the blended wine, and that's going to be a cheaper product, right? But we understand those terms now. We always did. We didn't. In the coming out of Prohibition, Americans have no palate. It takes years before we start to get craft beer and premium wines. I don't want cannabis to go all the way back so that 50 years from now there's a craft cannabis revolution. It's not necessary. We know what to do now, so why aren't we doing it? I appreciate we've had the race to the bottom. We all keep talking about it. So let's just fix it. One way to fix it is, yes, there will be big open fields of cannabis that's biomass, but there also needs to be a section and an honoring of farms like in Humboldt, where I'm from. That's why, not where I'm from, but where I now live, I should say, where not only do I love that they've been doing it forever.
So let's talk about Humboldt for everything and legacy. You brought that up. I believe that the next Screaming Eagle Harlan Estates, that's a wine reference, is going to come out of Humboldt. And I see Humboldt getting attacked by the government and other agencies. Okay, so maybe they were bad boys back then, but those bad boys, they understand how to grow the world's best cannabis.
Yeah.
And I believe that up in Humboldt is where you're going to see some of the best brands that will be globally known will be coming out of Humboldt. I can tell you from our own sales, there's a reason. Mike, why did you come to LA? Well, I was living in Barcelona and I saw our numbers, and the biggest state where we sold over half of our nutrients globally was in California. So I said, where in California? They go, well, Southern California is the biggest area. That was LA. And I was going back and forth from Bulgaria, where we had our labs and testing, and I saw this huge movement growing here in LA. And I realized media and marijuana crossroads is LA, and the biggest brands are going to come out of here and come out of Humboldt. And I planned my ass here, and here we are today in the studio in LA talking. This is it. This is the epicenter of cannabis globally. When we go over to Europe, everyone, it's Cali, 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 Cali. That's all they talk about. We have a superpower in California, and I've told politicians this. If you could take the French wine region and Napa Valley and combine them, that is what California is to cannabis globally.
Agreed. Yeah, no, I agree. And I look, yeah.
And I know the taxation here is screwed up, and there's a lot of things wrong, but that'll all get fixed. Yeah. It will, because, and there'll be first interstate trade, and then there's already stuff being shipped, man. There's stories from right now. People are shipping internationally. I'm not going to get into that, but it's happening.
Yeah.
California cannabis is all over the world and commands a premium dollar.
Yeah, I've experienced it firsthand. And even I am thinking, especially since I kind of have a more adult bent, I'm already looking to see how I might start to work in those markets. Papa Barkley had, and I'm sure they're still working on how to get it into the UK, and then eventually into the EU, into Germany. We tried to go the Canadian route through Health Canada so that we could get that export, because we can't export, with our...
Sure.
The feds need to do something, right? So if there's any federal people, any senators, all of us, anybody listening, let's just, the fact that it's still federally prohibited is such a hindrance right now. It just is. Never mind 280E, never mind the money part of it. To your point, just our place in the world, our ability to export brands. I was seeing this documentary about Coca-Cola in Germany during the war and how Fanta got made and all that, right? But our brands are so strong that even during a war, when we're at war with people, the notion of Hitler's favorite drink being Coca-Cola is mind-blowing to me, right? That's how strong our IP is, right? And so, yes, the fact that there's a McDonald's everywhere, we create brands here and we export them to the rest of the world. We will do that with cannabis. The only reason why we haven't yet is because we're literally handcuffed. It's crazy making, right? For no apparent reason. So we will get there. In Humboldt, these legacy farmers, I wanted to say something about the notion of bad actors. When you think if I say to you alcohol prohibition, you think Al Capone, right? Well, he wasn't a grape farmer or a barley farmer or a whiskey maker, right? So yes, when you have prohibition, you get bad actors.
Yes, you do.
Were there bad actors in the hills of Humboldt? Were there nefarious things that happened? Sure, because we attracted them because that was the distribution center, those kinds of people that were nefarious enough to take the risk. It should not be a reflection on the farmers who were home growing, right? There are some farmers, now we have second and third generation farmers, those who were kids and remember getting raided by, during the Reagan era when they drop out of the Black Hawk helicopters and whatnot. Look, it's not about payback, but we should give credit where credit is due. Similar to what I said about advanced nutrients, it's those folks, without them constantly trying to grow and constantly getting back out there, we would not have an industry, right? I remember as I grew here in Los Angeles, indoor, growing overnight, AC, all of it, all the hardships of environmental controls in the desert. And I remember in October, November, when the flood would come down, you'd be selling products to your dispensaries here and there, and all of a sudden, guys and gals are coming from up north with duffel bags, just dropping it on dispensaries, and all of a sudden, it's dispensaries are flush with cannabis, right? Of course, back then I would argue about how pretty my buds were and the bag appeal. And, at one point I'll admit slipping into the PGR so I could get the density and the rock hardness and the weight and all of that, all those tricks that we could do indoors and, convincing the public that our bags look like fire, even though I don't know that they're any better than the sun-grown. And that's going to be an argument that I'd love to have for years and years. But
the sun-grown, the reason why indoor cannabis looks like indoor cannabis, because it was bred that way over 40 years. There'll be a time when you can grow outdoor plants that look like indoor plants, and indoor plants, if you want, that look like outdoor plants.
And every cup I've judged, even with the most hardcore indoor OG gas heads, sun-grown almost always wins. To your point, we can now look at a trichome, and yes, we know that on an HPLC, we see terpenes, and the terpene profile might look the same. On a GC, but once we get into an HPLC or even more refined testing equipment, and we start to look at ketones and esters, we know that the building blocks of trichomes are not identical. The power of the sun just has more photons. More photons mean more ketones, more esters.
And there's invisible rays that we can't see with our eyes.
100%.
So I was in Morocco, and in the Reef Valley, and went to the hash makers, and the hash that Beldia is the one that follows the lineage for literally 1,000 years that they grew, and at the higher elevations, the hash fetches a higher price value because of the rays of the sun are different at 9,000 feet than they are down in the valley. So I asked the guy.
Yes.
He said, as you go down the mountainside, the kilo price drops.
Yeah, I believe.
And I smoked some of this stuff. It couch locked me. It was a totally different. That's when they're banging the sticks and they're doing it the old-fashioned way. with the
Dry
cheesecloth
yeah,
on it.
exactly.
And
Mechanical
they let me do it.
separation,
I did some. Boy, it's old school, but that just packed a wallop.
Like the fact that we had, so think about an ancient process like that, a clean, natural process. You could not buy, maybe Nasha hash up in Humboldt, but try getting that kind of Moroccan style hash in a dispensary anywhere here, not in Los Angeles. It's not being sold because most of the retailers are looking at data and they're like, nobody's buying that, right? I appreciate Fresh Frozen and what it's done, but Frenchie Rest in Peace right now would be like crying, because here it is, we have a burgeoning industry, lots of dispensaries, and you couldn't find a Temple Ball to save your life right now, right? And look, Fresh Frozen is awesome, but I think we should also be clear that Fresh Frozen should be cheaper, because one, it de-risks the farmer. Who doesn't want to cut their product and sell it that same day and not have to dry and cure it, right? Who doesn't want to be able to store a product in a freezer? I've watched hash that's been 2 years old, it's been in my freezer, and as long as it was well packed and frozen, it's fine. Right? So, and yes, it does have an awesome new different terpene profile, but you know what else does? When you cure it and dry it, and then you do a traditional bubble hash, or you dry sift and press a traditional Moroccan type hash, those chocolatey notes, those are all different VOCs that happen over time. Fresh Frozen gives you, it smells just like the fresh plant. That's a different thing, right? So right now we're in the rage of,
different experience,
Fresh Frozen, exactly. But all those nuances in culture just show you how robust this plant is. You mentioned earlier about a lab growing trichomes indoors.
Yeah.
Well, it doesn't strike me as like the right process, and I'll tell you one. Pollen chucking in Humboldt to create new strains and new flavors is what's awesome about cannabis, right? Think about every year we have a different flavor. Like a few years ago, when I was growing, there was no gelato, right? We were still in the dreams, right? Then the OGs were there and the sour diesels, but now we're really getting into the funky gas strains, right? You know what else is missing? And you'll appreciate this.
And the candy strains are huge.
Because the money, because it's been so commodified, try to find a real train wreck, a real super silver haze. Try to find anything that actually has to grow over 80 or 90 days. I would pay extra for it, but because the data shows that we can't convince the consumer to spend 25 to 50% more on a flower, because guess what? I spent 25 to 50% more time growing it, all of a sudden we just don't get it? No. We have more nuance in our commodity than wine will ever have, and we have yet to begin to explore it.
There's over 2,000 different chemicals in cannabis, over 500 different cannabinoids. There's so many, they haven't even named them all. Yeah.
There will be a time where, so now when you go to Napa, you take your lady, you go to the different little places, and you're sipping and you're drinking, and there's all this stuff to talk about. Cannabis tasting would be that times a million. Like, we don't, like, so for my hash product, one of the things I wanted to do is when you open the box, you'll see like a tree, and the tree will just be the genetic lineage of the product that you got, right? Okay. Like starting to do things like that. It's only a handful of us now that can be like, oh, and I'm not even good at it, so I'm not even gonna try. But like if I said to you, cherry gelato, or THC bomb, my friends in Humboldt would be like, oh yeah, that's a cross between this, and those two are a cross between this, and those are a cross between this, and those are a cross between this, right? I think that that's something we've been doing forever, and we should be doing it. Yes, when there's breakout ones that are awesome, we should hold them and get those tissue cultures and bank those to bring back, and for hash, like I want to do that. Like, our friends at Mammoth, we gifted them this massive cooler of fresh frozen so that, the THC bomb that we won first place with, back in like 2019, at one point, they can rewash that and introduce it as 2019, cup winner, right? So, but we have to build all of that. Again, so talking about where this puck is going, I believe that we are now, all these, I don't know about the generations, millennial and all those people, but age groups that are now, let's say people that are 35 now, when they're 45, they are going to be a completely different cannabis consumer.
The Gen X
right?
and the Alpha.
And we are not speaking to them. So what I would say to a money person now.
We're not educating them.
Yeah.
They just want to get high.
Right, but
which is self-medicating,
right, but they will educate themselves, right? Because think about it, kind of like we were talking about the Boone's Farm Mad Dog analogy, right? We start off, it's not what our parents are drinking; it's what we can afford.
It's what our girlfriend's like.
Yeah, you'll appreciate it. Remember, before these seltzers, like all these kids are drinking these seltzers and think it's new. I'm like, that's Zima. I'm sorry, we've been there, done that. It's like this notion of putting 5% alcohol in essentially water. Yeah, we've been trying that because young kids don't have a palate. Let's talk about palate for a minute, right? So if I gave you as a newbie a glass of grape juice and a glass of wine,
Yeah.
most people would be like, oh yeah, the grape juice is great. I don't know what this is. And I'd be like, keep drinking the wine. It gets better, right? Same thing with cannabis. When we started Papa Barkley, they wanted me to like flavor the tinctures. I refused to mask the taste of cannabis. Period, the end. It's like, it's another herb in our arsenal. We have to work with the taste of cannabis, right? So our Papa Select gummies, I know we were the first to do this, and other folks are starting to do it. If you say to me strain-specific gummy, that means the only thing that should be powering the taste of the gummy is the strain. So we developed this process where we take our awesome hash, we figure out how to decarboxylate it while keeping the terpenes in there. It's hard. That's the TLC. You got to want to do it. But if you do it right, you can then of course, if your cook process is right, you can introduce that hash at the appropriate time where the only flavor and color in the gummy is the concentrate. That's strain specific. And of course, some people be like, oh, it tastes a little weedy. It'd be like, it's supposed to.
Sure.
It's like, if you wanted a strawberry gummy, go to the mall. Yeah. You know what I mean? It's like, you came to a dispensary, why not have cannabis flavored things, different flavors? And not all of them work. Sometimes like maybe the GMO is a little funky. Maybe the fruity, well, we didn't call it Fruity Pebbles. We called it Rainbow Rubble, right? Is better for that, right? So making these, strain-specific concentrates or chocolates, right? Everybody say, oh, well, we'll put a masking. We're not going to put a masking agent. Cannabis has plenty of chocolatey notes to it, right? Let's figure out how the taste of cannabis pairs with what we're doing. And if it doesn't, maybe that shouldn't be a cannabis product. Like, I know the folks that are making, no offense, that are making the chips and making all these things. It's like, you don't see wine-flavored chips for a reason, right? And I don't know that we need cannabis-flavored chips. This notion of distillate and just sprinkling THC everything that is about getting high. Yep. And it's antithetical to cannabis culture, and it's keeping the kids dumb.
You were on the forefront of infused cannabis products. And you helped a lot of MSOs do all that. So how do you feel about that versus what you're saying now? How do you do a pure infused, and how do you keep it?
So I will say that when I speak,
clean and enjoyable.
I would never want to be a hypocrite. Everything that I've said that people are doing wrong, the reason why I can say it with such confidence is because I've done it. To your point, I've advised on grows in the desert where there's so much AC power out there, you could crack an egg and throw it up in the air and it would be freaking rock, not even over easy, over hard by the time it hits the ground, right? Why we're growing in the desert, I don't know. I know we're siloed in our different little states and whatnot. That's right. Did I help people blast light hydrocarbon like crazy and push for short path distillation? Yes. But I've lived that arc, and I believe that arc is everybody's art coming out of prohibition.
Yeah, you went through the trials and tribulation. You found out what you liked or what you didn't like.
Yeah, and also I hope looked for some kind of like objective truth, right? Like we started in a situation where we had to hide, right? So the notion I'm an indoor grower, I would never shame an indoor grower. But now when I'm standing on stage with a guy and he's flexing about his $500,000 a month light bill or electric bill, it's like, okay, well, your neighbors at the very least are impacted by that. The grid is impacted by that. Mother Nature is impacted by that. It's like, I grew indoors because we absolutely had to. But now it's like, maybe we can at the very least be, kind of like our friends at Glass House or just really be outside, right? And just, we can use all modern agricultural technology to curate our wine, our cannabis vineyards, right? So not embracing the power of the sun, ? Right? And yeah, the stakeholders in Vegas, I'm sorry, or even in Canada, you spent $100 million on your super grow, you're trying to get your return, and so now you're gonna go against our industry and block legislation to prevent my farmers in Humboldt from exporting to you, right? So we've kind of, we have some work to do. Right?
Well, we have lots of work to do.
But I understand and respect why it rolled out this way. I'm just trying to make sure that I keep trumpeting let's keep moving forward and let's keep fixing it, because yes, mistakes were made. I made them. And so I'm ready to say, I, scooped up a distressed asset and pushed a legacy operator out. I grew in the desert and used way too much electricity. I understand what bag appeal is and how you can get bud density by, putting certain things in to make rock hard buds that may not be more potent, but definitely way more, right? All those things, right? And on the other side of it, I realized that what we really advocated for is this notion of plant medicine, an alternative that I think as a nation and probably as a world that we so desperately need. That chill factor of cannabis is so needed right now, right? So yes, do I want the entire world to be exposed to safe access? That's the first thing. But can we get it to be now in line with some of the other values in terms of sustainability, all natural that we're all looking for and everything else? Yes.
What's your biggest fear about the cannabis, our cannabis space?
You know, if you'd asked me like a minute ago, I would be like that the feds would roll it back. You know, I was wondering that, you know, our hemp brothers have kind of de facto gotten cannabis legal with this THCA from hemp and this loophole in the Farm Bill. And I worry about the political implications. But then I am like, the world is already, the cat's out of the bag, right? Like the world has already embraced cannabis. We've kind of won the war on drugs and are just negotiating their surrender. So my biggest fear is that the actors that never did the American public a service, and yes, I'm talking about our people at Pharma, I'm talking about the folks that are telling me that Cheerios is a heart-healthy product and not to eat butter, will grab hold of cannabis and just continue the misinformation. My biggest, and that's not just my fear for cannabis, that's my fear for us as a nation. We have to start to be able to find facts again, right? And we have to be able to just, you know, look, as a person of color, I could say that like some things can't be fixed or repaired. You just have to move past them, right? And so, yes, we let tobacco people come into our food industry and gamify it. We let them pour money in so that people would stop eating eggs, stop eating butter, and start eating more processed foods. And now there's generations that believe that is truth. You don't have to say I'm sorry. Just fix it and move on. So that's my biggest fear, is that gamification will now bleed into our industry, and most people will be getting bunk weed, mids at best, with red, yellow dye number 5.
There's an issue right now that a lot of the new nutrient companies have come in. They're just basically buying ag salts and labeling them, and they're just growing mids. Advanced nutrients has always been about that top 30 percentile. That's all we care about. We grow guys who want to grow the best cannabis and put it out there. We don't care about the rest. That's it. That's it. So what are you doing for the future? You have a new brand that you're launching. What are you doing? And I want people to hear about this because if you're doing a brand, it's going to be of the highest caliber and quality. Yeah, and they should know about it. So
my last project is, you know, my wife has supported me since day one, and you can imagine that she was a professional and I was an underground grower.
And what did she? What was
so
like
I've been married
during that day. Did she give you a lot of static for that, or was she supportive?
No, I mean she knew it. She knew it from the day I met her.
Okay.
I did meet her. She was a friend. You know, Montel was dating this like supermodel, and I dated the supermodel's friends.
Right.
The good news is we've been married 23 years and have 2 kids.
Congratulations on that.
And is awesome. But she, you know, she's always supported cannabis, but you know, we never worked professionally. Recently, she started, you know, going through her midlife menopause journey, started doing all this research and realized, oh my God, cannabis is like, there's so many things that it works for. And of course, she uses cannabis. I've always, you know, when she started having a hard time sleeping, I was like, here's a sleep gummy, here's sleep capsules, here's a vape pen on your bedside, you know, all these kinds of things, right? She just recently launched her first brand. I did formulate it, clean from start to finish, all the values we've been talking about. It's called Clea Midlife, and it's a suite of products specifically for women in menopause, right?
Clea Midlife. How do you spell that?
CLEA Midlife, right?
Okay,
and so Clea, and like I'm gonna do a topical. I wanted to wait a reasonable amount of time from transferring Papa Barkley to Mammoth before coming out with another topical, but you know, there's a lot of research now that shows that women that are going through midlife, that strength training is real. My wife was always a person that she did all kinds of, she's always stayed fit, but never wanted to lift weights because she didn't want to be muscular. And I was always telling her, yeah, you lift weights and see how much get muscular.
They've done a study that as we get older, if we eat correctly and exercise, we have a 400% chance of living longer.
100%. Yeah,
400%. Yeah. I'm taking that odds.
That's right. So with women, because of like the osteoporosis and stuff, like real resistance training is important. So you have all these women
bone density, resistance training.
So we're going to partner with an influencer and drop, you know, a line of fitness cannabis products, topicals, CBD
Really?
for recovery and whatnot.
Fitness.
Yeah. So, but specifically, we're going on the niche, right? Specifically,
Is it for
women.
men and women, or just mostly women?
So my wife would not want me to say this. All the products technically work for men. Like we have a great cultivar, CBG cultivar. You take 50 milligrams of CBG. And it really cuts. I take 2. I take 100, and it really cuts through the brain fog. It's not like coffee. It's just like really clears your head, right? Yes, it will work for men. The sleep product, yes, it'll work for men. The topical will work for men. But we just happen to craft the brand to be focused on female needs, right?
Sure.
I also have the Clean Label Movement, where as an advocate, working with the Buddhist group, working with the Ganje program, to try to just bring that top tier, be that thought leader. Not just
so
me,
how
but
are
a
you
lot of
going to
folks.
how are you going to implement that? I mean, obviously through education, being on shows like this, you're going to do that. Tell us more about that. How can someone here who's listening get involved in that movement and be part of the Cannabis Clean Movement?
So if you are a farmer or a value-added producer that wants to do top-tier stuff, join our Clean Label Movement on LinkedIn. I might reach out to you for some sponsorship as we start to really roll out education, right? We're building content similar to what you're doing here, like, right? We know now in the days of the internet, it's about content generation, right? And content generation used to be difficult, but with AI, it's not, right? So yeah, sure, there's more content out there, but we can produce more content. So we're kind of in our rat race of just more content, right?
Yeah.
Getting out there, getting the word out there, right? Who would benefit from the Clean Label Movement? Well, I think any farmer that wants to be honored for their work, because remember, clean means that the farmer did it right. I can't underscore that enough, right? Also, I think it's skating where the puck is going, because I think as consumers, they might be drinking Bud Light now, but on a special occasion, they might be like, what's better than that? And the minute they ask that, they start to self-educate. So yes, you can push education, have it out there, but like us when we were younger, drinking the Boone's Farmer, the Mad Dog, at one point you want to impress the young lady or the young gentleman or whoever it might be. And so you're like, well, I'm not going to get that. I'll get this champagne bottle. Well, where is that in cannabis, right? Let's start educating and letting, when the consumers are ready to ask that question, right now it's like everybody's going into Tiffany's for the first time and getting a blue box. Once they've gotten settled with that and they're ready to get diamonds, we need to make sure they understand what that means in our industry, right? Get the nomenclature right, really build that top shelf. 2-3 years.
Is there a stamp that they can put on their products that you intend to use?
Look, if it was up to me, I'm just rolling this out, I would build a coalition, and it would be great if Biden. So last year, I'm a big visualizer, right? Last year, I was at BizCon, I was like, I want to get nominated for an MJ. Papa Barkley was nominated. Okay.
Great.
Next year, I want to be nominated. I want the Clean Label Movement to be a thing, right? And this is not just about me. This is advocacy, right? This is not about.
Yes.
This is about like me wanting to just use my voice and pay back cannabis to make sure the industry is going right. Now, yes, on the heels of that, I do have a personal brand. I have a deck.
What's it called? Talk about it.
So look, I think what's missing, and
Money guys are listening to this.
Yeah, I was in.
And they know you built a successful brand, Papa and Barkley. The next Papa and Barkley's.
I feel like I've maybe had too much of the cannabis to tamp down my ego. But I have put my name on it, right? I have a brand called GR Cannabis or Guy Rocourt Cannabis, where it is me as a tastemaker and a curator curating for you a set of products. They're not, you could say they're not necessarily novel products. It's pre-rolls. But when I say pre-rolls, like here's a simple one. Pre-roll market is on fire. You want to talk about cannabis shame? Why are we all smoking pre-rolls that are like sucking through a pen cap for some reason? Like every pre-roll comes to this little tiny thing. We're like sucking on these little things. Or I appreciate dog walkers, because they're small and you can't finish it. It's like, no. That's not a form factor that's fun to smoke. Where's the experience of that? If I had asked you 10 years ago, when weed's legal, what are you going to be smoking? I'd be like, I'm going to be smoking fatties.
Jeter's have these things called Canon. I don't know if you've seen it.
Yes, I have.
Fuck, the packaging is just gorgeous. Whoever did that packaging.
Even the Marley's.
I like to shake their hand because it's so good. And it has a gold glass tip on it that goes straight through. It's big. You're not sucking out of that little hole. That's right. It's a great product.
Yeah. I think anything over 10 millimeters in diameter is where we start. So it doesn't have to be full on Canagar, but somewhere in that 10 to 12, like around that half an inch. What you do is people are like, oh, that's going to be strong. I'm like, in fact, it's not, because you're getting more airflow, and now you're having a smoking experience.
And you don't have to smoke the whole thing.
And you don't.
It's just like you get a bottle of Jack. Does that mean you got to drink the whole bottle?
That's right.
Hell no.
Right. And let's talk about experience. So potency mindset. In BizCon this year, you see the first machines that they're showing you. Oh, it does pre-rolls, and then it sends this needle in and injects concentrates. Okay. I come from the legacy. I know what a one-hit wonder is. I know like what it is to constantly try to make it strong. However, again, speaking to an adult, if I say to you, let's go for a drink, I'm not saying let's go get drunk. If I say to you after this interview, let's go have a smoke, I'm not saying let's get couch locked.
That's right. Let's go get some white lightning.
Right. We want to have experience, right? So I'd rather share something with you that's maybe 18, 19% clean, awesome, well-grown flower that's nice and terpene.
And you don't want to get them too high. You want them to have a great experience.
Yeah.
I see these people who try to get people really messed up. I go, why are you doing that? You just lost a customer for life.
Right. And even if you wanted to, why not have them buy two? Like, again, using the alcohol analogy, right? First of all alcohol is standardized in potency, right? Leaving only now the differentiators of the terpenes, meaning the taste and type of alcohol, and the quality of refinement in the distillate, right? And you want to make sure that your spirit is well refined and clean so that when you and I have a drink, we're like, oh, I'll have another one of those, right? We can always have another, right? But the experience is what should be the champion. That is the difference between prohibition mindset and what I candidly think is a mature and adult mindset, right? We don't buy, and you don't walk into a liquor store and say, give me the most potent. You don't walk into McDonald's and say, give me the most caloric.
No.
Taste and experience is everything, and it's totally missing from our industry right now, right? So the products that I've curated for GR Cannabis are all about experience.
So where can people find GR Cannabis? Like,
GR Cannabis.
When's it going to be available? I want to try some.
Well,
please send some here.
To all the people that are listening and are financiers, I have not actually opened it up to capital raising.
Oh, you haven't?
Well, I started in the summer and it just wasn't the right time, right? Like you got to read the signs, right? You can only knock on the door once. And I knocked on a few doors, and with the election looming and the craziness that is California cannabis, and you know, to your point earlier, brands are born in California and New York, right? So I have a design and all the contacts to launch in New York and California somewhat simultaneously. This is a brand play, an artisan brand play for the top
go
shelf.
for
right?
Germany too.
Yeah, it would be awesome.
That's it.
I just said that my ego's tamped down, but like honestly,
okay.
if there are real money people out there listening, I think I have an idea to do something as significant as you know the Liquid Death folks.
Sure.
Right? Selling water, right?
Yeah.
Yes. You give me $100 million, I will emblazon a brand on this industry and change the way people look at cannabis worldwide. That would be, it's a lofty goal. I can't do it by myself.
Anyone can do it. You can do it because I'm a huge fan of Papa Barkley. I saw what you did with that. I have no doubt at all that you can take that $100 million investment and turn it to a multi-billion-dollar investment.
And look, it's about partnership. Again, I want to make sure
this is a global brand you want to build.
Yeah. I think we should be thinking like that. And again, just to the investors that are listening, it's like this is not hubris or ego. It's a team effort. I don't have $100 million, so respect. Sure. Even though I've said some things about investors along the way here, it's like
there's some really great investors out there who get it.
Yeah, I respect.
And there's a whole bunch that don't. It's just the way it is.
I respect the fuel in the tank, as it were, but there is, if somebody's willing to let me interpret the data and show you the way that now is the time to, pun intended, plant the seeds for that household brand, right? There are some brands in consumer product sectors that are indelible. Apple, right? Dom Perignon, Don Julio, right? These brands, or Louis Vuitton, it doesn't happen overnight, right? It happens because you have an artisan that has an adherence to quality and understands the space they're in. Louis Vuitton starts selling trunks when steamer engines and more people are traveling. They keep a strict adherence to quality, and their price, like I would not go out with a high price now. I know that the consumer is not going to pay me my value. Right?
Not in this economy, not right now.
Right. However,
that will change.
What I can do is create a value-added brand that I'll never have to lower my prices, right? I'll never have to fall to price compression, right? And I'll just keep letting the brand, you earn the moniker of luxury, right? Back in the day, Louis Vuitton was a trunk maker. Now you can't buy a Louis Vuitton bag unless you're like super wealthy, because they've earned that, right? Similar to all the, like Dom Perignon is where it is. It takes time to get there, but now is the time to plant the seed. And look, again, we all need to earn. So I've just been around the block long enough to understand how we would start a brand that can get value now, meet the consumer where they are now, and grow with them so that 10 years from now, it is that flagship brand. It is that brand in cannabis that everybody knows is quality, and you just pay for it. Like you don't. There's analysis about this. At one point, the brand takes over the value proposition, not what's inside.
By the way, that's accurate. The brand, especially if you're number one in your category, commands a huge premium. Not a little premium, a huge premium.
Yeah. Patagonia is a good one and great company, great works on it. You've seen the recent documentary. But you think about like in Costco, they're selling these puffy jackets. Jerry, I think, is the brand, right? Mm-hmm. Decent quality, totally works. $29.99. Same Patagonia jacket, $300, right? Yeah. But you don't even question it. I don't question it. I know that as I could try to dissect the why is it better? But you don't, because Patagonia has earned that money. North Face has earned
the trust.
Money, earned the trust of the consumer. Yeah. So what I would say to investors now is, I'm knowledgeable enough to operate right now in today's space, but with enough marketing dollars, because that's what it comes down to get the message out. We have a message. There's a white space and a message that this burgeoning community is ready to receive that will not only make us a premium brand today, but will set us up for where the puck is going in the future.
Agreed. What do you think about Donald Trump and the future of cannabis?
Without getting too into the politics, again, I'm a patriot, and I do feel that...
Listen, we got to get into the politics.
That,
unfortunately,
I feel
that's
like
the only way we're going to get to the end of the tunnel.
Dude, somehow we've become an oligarchy. I think that's fair to say. I think that when we have Russian operatives around, it's almost like the Russian oligarchy and our oligarchs, a bunch of rich people trying to pull strings and manipulate nations. But I think from the look, and I'll be honest, I'll give a kudos. Okay. We raised $70 million at Papa Barkley during the Trump era, and as soon as the Trump era was over, the money dried up, right? So the fact is, I do believe that in 10 days from now, a bunch of rich people are going to get richer. And while I never really believed in trickle-down economy, those rich people are who my hand is out for. Give me money to start a business. So if we're being honest, I think that it may be okay for the cannabis industry or anybody that's an entrepreneur and a hustler. It is the day of the hustler, okay? But I will also say that chaos will ensue, because the problem with the party on the right now is they're easy to galvanize and say no to anything that's not them. But there is no cohesion in the conference. And so do I think RFK is going to even get confirmed? Can they get together and make a vote and not have infighting?
Yeah.
I think it's just, we saw that in the first 4 years. Nothing gets done. It's just chaos, right? And in that chaos, hustlers benefit.
You want to know what the biggest challenge to our industry is? We do not have a unified lobby group.
Oh my God, I say that all the time.
They're these, and we're trying to put one together. I've talked to a few folks. Legalize America, and it has to be done. If we expect a snowball's chance in hell being successful, you have to put a super PAC together. Yeah. And it's just the way the game is played. And if we don't, we're going to get our ass handed to us over and over. And billions of dollars are going to be lost. Yeah. And instead, let's pool our money together. Let's be smart about how we do it. And there's a lot of great strategies that can be employed that will just move us forward. And I say, everybody listening, Super PAC is the way to go for our voice to be heard. I mean, I spent a lot of money here in the state of California just so I could have the seat time and talk to senators and talk to congressmen and talk to assemblymen and talk to the governor about cannabis and where it should go. And, twice I had them talked in this close to a tax holiday in California. And I still believe that they should do that just so they can see the power of what it is to tax cannabis as a normal business and where it will go for every single one of us in our industry. Yeah. They say $35 billion of legal cannabis are growing here in the United States. Well, if they could get the lobbying group together, and if you include hemp, not the THCA side, but I'm talking farmers for hemp, for rope, and by the way,
cotton production,
car panels. Ben Drunkers from Sensi Seed owns a company called Hempflax. He makes car parts for Audi, BMW, Mercedes, Bugattis. They're the door panels and dashboards. Yep. They will not let him talk about it. It is as strong as carbon fiber at a fifth of the cost.
Yeah, I've seen that.
And so I had a farmer come to me when the 2018 Act came out and go, Mark, I got 400,000 acres I want to grow. This is California. I want to grow. I said, okay, so how are you going to handle post-production? He goes, well, I was going to go get those combines. Well, you can't because they're not available. They got to be purposely made. John Deere and International Harvester, I guess, are trying to figure that out. And I go, besides, you can't. There's not enough seeds or clones to plant 400,000 acres. The farmers of America would absolutely want to grow hemp as a commodity that can be used in feed. Jack Herrera's book. There's 10,000 different things.
Oil density, like we're subsidizing corn oil now for fuel when I believe hemp seed oil is 10 times more energy dense, right? We should just be, and it's better for the land. It's less the data is so there, but the feds are woe to move on it. But to your point about the lobby, one of the things I often say is we need an NRA style lobby, right? There's a reason why the whole gun control argument dies all the time.
The two biggest lobbying groups in America are NRA and APAC.
Yeah.
And if you employ the strategies of any one of those for our cannabis sector, we will kick ass, take names, and have a wonderful future.
And if we don't,
for not only us but for future generations.
Who are we taking market share if not pharmaceuticals, tobacco, right? Those folks they're in the ear of our legislators, and we have no voice. So look, kudos to Steph Shear at Americans for Safe Access or Normal. Yep. If I were able to raise that money, my clean label movement, kind of off of like what the NRA does, right? The NRA doesn't try to talk about all gun policy or whatnot. They have one clarion statement, Second Amendment. Mm-hmm. For me, I would be like, cannabis is plant medicine. Like one thing that we can all as an industry line up behind and put our money behind. We have all these disparate associations all infighting. None of them have 2 pennies to rub together, right? Much less contribute to a political campaign or understand and employ professional lobbyists to help us navigate the political landscape, right? So again, liquid death, why does it work? It's not just about the product. It's not just about distributing the product. It's also about the entire echo chamber and
the community
sphere, right?
Built around it.
With $100 million, it's like, one, I think you consolidate all Normal, ASA, all of them, and create one lobby.
Yep.
Now that lobby needs a bite-sized soundbite. I think it should be plant medicine, right? Because that's what we are, first and foremost. Yep. One thing that, no matter what they say at the feds, every time something goes wrong with guns, something goes wrong, the NRA says, Second Amendment. We need such a clear cut through the fog that anytime we're about to be prohibited, anytime something goes down, we say plant medicine or all natural, right? Tax, whatever it is. Like, it is the people's right to have this product of the earth. Like, that's the kind of singular voice that we need to have. But yeah, everybody's so busy building, myself included, building their own businesses. So in crafting my new brand, GR, part of it and part of the Clean Label Movement and part of what I'm doing is trying to pull that together, right?
United States Cannabis Council, Legalize America, has started a super PAC. And it's starting to kind of coalesce slowly, but more and more companies globally have to get behind this and sit down and make a strategy that makes sense. And it starts with the congressmen, all the new congressmen who come in. They should be given a half-hour presentation on the benefits of cannabis or a 1-hour lunch and learn, every single one of them.
They want money because it's like, I feel like the hemp people have done that.
Politicians want money, but they also care about the tax revenue it's going to bring in, the jobs in their community, and what it's going to do for the veterans. Yep. And we hit all three of those.
Yeah. And look at California. It's like probably created 200 plus jobs.
You can spend the money smartly. They're all going to have their hand out. Doesn't mean we have to give it to them. Yeah. What we have to do is do it smartly.
Think about all the brands, all the money, and all the folks in it. Nobody is trying to stand out and be that leader, that visible leader that embodies what cannabis is. And I'm not even saying that it could be me. It doesn't need to be me. Even if it was a more visible partner like the tech bros have Elon Musk as a concept,
Yeah.
right? And Mark Zuckerberg, right? And
Well,
we see how they're
in our
interacting.
industry, we have the MSOs, and the MSOs they spent a hell of a lot of money in Florida trying to get it legalized. And a lot of people said, well, they didn't include the home grower. Well, unfortunately, in Florida, they only allow for one law, one act, whatever you want to call it, at a time. You can't put like two things in there. Oh, we want legalization and we want home grow.
Yeah, but with respect, and I don't want to make any enemies of my
No, go
friends in
ahead.
Florida.
Go ahead.
However, talk about cannabis shame. When you talk about obscuring the flower because you don't want people to see it, when you talk about it has to be ground before people get it, what? Like,
That's not right either.
when you disparage the home grower. So
Yeah.
the laws in Florida were kind of rolled out with a heaping of shame and prohibition mindset, right? We think 64
Interesting.
needs reformation,
Right.
gods. And mind you, this is the state that had opiate pain clinics. Right?
Right.
So the state of loopholes and dispensing massive amounts of opiates is trying to tell me that you can't show a flower.
So there's this split of cultures in our industry. The investors and the traditional guys and gals who came out of the marketplace. What they're not under, I see them banging their heads all the time. This is retarded. This doesn't make any sense. What both groups must realize is they need each other, because when it comes to maybe making a law or writing it up, why don't you talk to some people that are traditional who understand the mindset of where you're going to get the resistance from, so you can put together an amendment or bill that's not going to get the resistance from, because you're the money guy now, who's going to get resistance from the traditional market, because they're just gunning for the money people to make a mistake. Instead, let's come together and do that, and then be smart about how you spend the money. Don't be, spending it frivolously. Spend it where there's a congressman or a senator in a race, and the race is close, and a little bit of our money will make a big difference. That's where you invest, and you get ahead of it, way ahead, through education, and this is all we have to do.
So,
it's not easy, but a group will come together, and this will happen at some point, hopefully sooner than later.
Absolutely. Well, look, it requires a little bit of mutual respect, and I've heard it couched as
Mutual respect is an excellent word.
Roots versus suits. Right now, here's the problem.
I never heard that. Roots versus suits.
Now,
Yeah.
the problem is the roots, as counterculture, have disrespect for the suits, and the suits look at the roots as like basically drug dealers, right?
Yeah.
Now, in a normal world, what it should be is financier and visionary, right? The problem is the money just wants to make money, doesn't know where we're going. The visionary knows where they're going. Like, and if I were to throw my hat in the ring, if you will.
Well, you already have. You're bringing out a new product.
I have a
Good
vision for the industry that will, of course, be a profitable, lucrative industry.
Of course.
Right? So if I had a financier, I would love to explain to them not my roots and legacy, but my vision for an industry that is profitable. That includes working with legislators to abate taxes. Why? Economics 101. You could overtax an industry and have it be small and make a little money, or you could tax appropriately and let it grow, let the pie grow and make way more money.
Absolutely.
That we don't have to reinvent these economic wheels.
Germany figured that out.
Well, the only reason why we haven't is I go back to that cannabis shame. The prohibition mindset. The reason why California hasn't done it is because they still think this is some illicit drug. Kudos to California for putting the DCC under the Department of Agriculture. That was a good move, because having a separate MPP or whatever, we're just another agricultural product. We just want to be accepted at the table. But that acceptance hasn't been fully yet. That's what we need a coalition to be like, look at this plant. It's normal. The public wants it. Let it go and make your money. Right now, they're getting in their own way because they have this shame, this stigma that somehow, I really believe that most politicians, the DCC was having trouble finding qualified people because career state officials and state folks don't want to work in the cannabis entity for fear that it might taint their career. There is still a stigma associated with being aligned with cannabis at the legislative level.
That is so unfortunate.
We have to clear that up, right? And that's going to take a little bit of a push.
Well, I think federal acceptance will. And one of the things
That's the big one.
Trump said, he's in favor of medical cannabis because of the veterans. And he's seen what opiates have done to them versus what cannabis does. And cannabis has been used to get a lot of our veterans off of opiates. And so one of the first things that they say that they're going to be shooting for is rescheduling from Schedule 1 to Schedule 3. That will take 1,000-pound burden off of all our
It's
backs.
a baby step, because I'll also
It's a
say
huge baby
there's no
step.
plant medicine in Schedule 3. It puts us still, you asked me about what my fear was. I still fear that because we have no strong lobby, we could go back to Marinol and Sativex. Already our dispensaries are distillate-based. Imagine if legislation rolls out at the federal level that all value-added products can only be active pharmaceutical ingredients, not whole plant.
Can you imagine if it goes back to the traditional market? We now have a very sophisticated traditional market that knows how to make all kinds of products now out of cannabis, where it was just selling flower. That's no longer the case. It's thousands of different products. So that'd be crazy to go backwards. Going forward is the only sensible thing to do.
Absolutely. And, I'm a plant-made advocate. One of the things I was excited about at BizCon was the advanced mycology products that I've been seeing. And, I happen to be partnered with a gentleman who has an amazing spray technology that is, right now, it's all kinds of adaptogens. Of course, it can have all kinds of adaptogens. Let me put it, I'll leave it there.
Okay.
And to me, plant medicine is that. And like, I've had the argument with my friends at MAPS. It's like ketamine and MDMA, it's great. Go ahead and get your FDA approval.
Right.
I'm not seeking FDA approval. And it's not that I'm railing against Schedule 3. It's just things that are grown in the ground, I really, truly believe belong to the people. And while potent, are historically proven to be non-toxic and non-addictive. And that goes for even our adaptogens that may have some of the more potent aspects to them, right? It's like, when I think about, vets I served, when you think about PTSD and some of the concoctions that they want to give folks, it's like, really? Cannabis is probably all they need. And Papa Barkley and myself always want to support vets. Even if they need another guided step, I would be in the lane of master plans and that kind of to your point, dissolving ego, making peace with yourself. Those are the things that we know about psilocybin. Those are things we know about cannabis and THC. They work on those levels. And, as everybody's struggling to understand what indica, what does a strain do? One thing I do know, and this is from being, a legacy provider, is that they all work on the brain, and the brain is open to prompts. I do think that when you buy a product that says sleep, regardless of the strain, the minute it says sleep, that placebo effect, that brain prompt is powerful, right? Same thing with mycology, right? So the fact that we're not leaning in to using that, to having folks take these medicines and then prompting them to work on, to self-reflect, to be more vulnerable and accept and let go of what's happened in the past, which is a definition of curing PTSD, it's unconscionable, because the answer is right there. And the only reason why it's not fully deployed is because of just rampant misinformation and old archaic ideas. The vet thing is very sensitive, because it's like, I told you my story of why I got out thinking peace on earth. But the reality is, ever since then, we've been in endless war. When I was a young person, one of the things I wanted was, I don't know if you know this, but officers in the military are empowered by the Constitution. And when you get to be an admiral, you get your own flag, right? It has 1 star or 2 stars. So if you ever see an admiral, right, they'll have the American flag and they'll have their flag.
Really?
Yes. I wanted a flag so bad, right? And look, I think if I had stayed in the military, I would, right now at my age, I'd probably definitely be a captain without question. I'd probably be deselected. I'd be, flag would be on my radar. I'm not, I don't doubt it. My cousin who stayed in is now doing defense contracting, making $1 gajillion for no apparent reason, it seems. Yeah, we ended up being in an endless war since, the 1990s, right? Doing all kinds of stuff. But do you know that the VA, a lot of them are closing because, unfortunately, since 1990, we technically haven't been in a war. So none of those folks are veterans of foreign wars, right? They're all just vets who saw all kinds of craziness come back home. And because the public, it's not like Vietnam anymore. There's no obvious war effort. So we don't have the same sensitivity and welcome homingness or sympathy towards these folks, but they have seen and are suffering and served just like everybody else. And we have an answer for them. And pharma wants to get in on it. And I think I think, again, I don't want to make any enemies, but some of the stuff that we're serving up is not the appropriate cocktail. It just isn't. It's not serving those gentlemen and ladies the right way. So we could do so much better there,
Right.
you know. And I really like the veterans that have gotten into the cannabis industry and are leaning in and trying to support other vets. You know, a lot of the outfits that we support, and we, you know, whether I know California, I forget the exact regulation, but there's a regulation where you can, you know, manifest product right before it's expired to veterans organizations. So we used to do a lot of tinctures and stuff like that. That's super important. I'd love to see mycology be the next step. And, you know, again, thank you, because the product that you guys are offering reminds me of advanced nutrients back in the day. Here's another way for prosumers and people at home to immediately get into it, right? And at one point, there's this threshold where there's enough people doing it where we force that agenda, right? Again, I don't think that cannabis would be where we are if we didn't have companies that were investing in that education through, like, here's this product that makes it easy for you, and now you learn how to do it. You know, it's amazing. It's amazing. And so, yeah, I'd love to work with you on that further, because I think that the two industries are somewhat tied together. I look at master plants as over-the-counter cannabis. Psilocybin's like somewhere in there, maybe more like, you know, like the Claritin, where you maybe show your ID.
It's going to be the next big thing is going to be psilocybin, for sure. Microdosing, not necessarily taking transcendental doses where you got to heal yourself.
Well, again, it should be about the experiencing, and big doses are... There's nothing else we do in big doses. Everything else we do for the experience, right? Big doses are prohibition mindset, scarcity mindset.
So, Guy, if people want to get a hold of you, and especially if there's an investor looking for the next big thing that you're positioned to make happen, how do they get hold of you?
It's easy. You can find me on all your, you know, I'm around, but it's easy. Guy at GuyRocourt.com, or you can go to GuyRocourt.com and you can, or Guy Rocourt Consulting. Yeah.
And Guy is spelled G-U-Y.
Yeah, it's a French name. My parents are first generation Americans, and or immigrants, I should say. And my dad's name was Guy, and he worked for Albert Einstein College of Medicine in the Bronx years ago. And it wasn't until he passed that I realized that he had let his coworkers call him Guy. I never did that. I think at one point, when I was in high school and stuff, in the military, they always called me by my last name. But then when I got to college and people started calling and saying, "Is Guy there?" I was like, wait. Only people that know me call me Guy, so they must be a bill collector.
There you go. Well, Guy, it was great having you on the show. Anytime you want to come back on, would love to have you. You're very articulate, you're intelligent, and you understand this industry inside and out. So it was a pleasure.
Thank you. Thanks for having me, and thanks for allowing me to just share some of the message, because, at this point, you know, I put kids through college. One's, you know, about to be a doctorate.
Whoa,
cannabis has been so good to me and my family, and it's been my thing. And I feel like at this stage, like, I do want to earn and do the next big thing, but I want to advocate and see this industry roll out correctly. Like that's the real passion right now. And, you know, we deserve it. We deserve the industry we fought for.
We do. Sammy Sosa, what do you say? Baseball's been very, very, very good to me. Cannabis has been very, very good to me and to you as well. An incredible journey it has given both of us.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you for being on the show today.
Thanks, Mike.